been suggested, which is that we have a roll call of the members present. So, Gabe, would you start out and identify yourself?
Gabe Roberts. Stephen Eldridge.
Casey Stewart.
Don Royston.
Office.
Gay Moon. Janet Booker Davis.
Larry Elmore.
Who is missing today is Trey Watkins and Charlene Spiceland because of other commitments. For the record, the meeting has been properly noticed on the board's website. A board change is that Jennifer Brundridge has resigned her position. She was a public member for a number of years. I don't recall how long she served, well beyond her term because there wasn't an appointment made to succeed her. But she has resigned because of other career commitments in Chattanooga. She served very well and was a great active board member. The governor has appointed Judy Weatherby as her successor as a public member, and her resume is on the iPad. I'm not sure why it says lottery. I hope that it's the State Board of Accountancy and not the Lottery Board that she's joining. But she was not able to join us, but will be at the January meeting. Wendy, would you like to introduce Jared, please?
Yes. Jared Stamper is down here to my left. He is our new complaint coordinator and started August 10th with the board. So I've asked him to come introduce himself and kind of see how a board meeting goes today.
Jared, you have the floor.
We'll just go with a simple thanks for the opportunity.
Great. Where are you from?
I'm originally from southeastern Kentucky, Whitesburg, right on the Virginia border.
Great. Well, welcome to this State Board of Accountancy. Another guest we have was introduced yesterday is Kara Fitzgerald, and is the CFO of the Tennessee Society of CPAs and is taking over Wendy's responsibility of monitoring on behalf of the society the activities of the board. Brad Floyd, who usually also comes, is out of town. So, Kara, welcome to this round of excitement. Remind members to speak into the microphone and ask members to sign the necessary timesheets and submit travel receipts. Have the agenda that has been distributed ahead of time, but would ask if there are any changes or additions that anybody would like to make at this time. I will go with the agenda as published. The next item is the approval of minutes, and I ask the indulgence of the board in deferring that until our next meeting. The minutes are accurately describe the activities that took place at the last meeting, but we believe that there are some clarifications and alterations that need to be made, and we haven't really had a time to get those implemented and distributed to you ahead of time for review. For example, Casey Stewart was at the last meeting but is not listed as being in attendance. So, but we'll get those minutes to you as well as a draft. We'll get the minutes of this meeting drafted early, and we'll get them reviewed so that you'll have plenty of time to review them before the next meeting. I believe that all of you have received a copy of the proposed committee assignments, which we really utilized yesterday. The licensing committee is again led by Stephen Eldridge. with Gay Moon, Charlene Spiceland, and Larry Elmore. Law and Rules is going to be chaired by Trey Watkins, with Gay Moon, Charlene Spiceland, Janet Booker Davis, and Gabe Roberts. Enforcement is Casey Stewart, again as chair, with Gabe Roberts, Don Royston, Larry Elmore, and Janet Booker Davis. And by tradition, the executive committee is made up of the officers, Don Royston, Casey Stewart, myself, and Trey Watkins as the immediate past chair. So I think according to somewhere in there that, well, at the last meeting, the chair was given authority to appoint the committees, but I believe that according to in the rules someplace, it indicates that the committees need to be approved by the board. I would like a motion to approve the appointment of these committees.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Good. Any opposed? Thank you. Next item is Director's Report. Wendy?
All should have on your iPads a copy of the Director's Report. Some of the items I'd like to highlight on here are future meeting dates. The first three have already been approved by this board, but I'm requesting approval for the last two, October 21st, 2016, January 20th, 2017. Chairman Bluffus already mentioned the public member appointment that was made this week. Judy Weatherby, she will be joining us at the next meeting. Exposure drafts. There are 2 exposure drafts out right now. One is on the CPA exam, and that is currently open for comment. Comments are due November 30th. This exposure draft outlines the next exam, which is planned to be launched the beginning of 2017. So we'll see more about it next year, but it will launch for candidates early 2017. I believe there was an email distributed with some webinars that you could attend to see a little bit more about it. Did anybody attend those or have any comments they'd like to make of anything they've heard? If there's anyone who wants to, if this board wants to comment on that, I would just need to know so we can put a group together. There's also the continuing education exposure draft. The comment period has already ended on this, but it is proposed revisions to the statement on standards for continuing professional education, which is what all of our providers are required to follow when they present courses. The comment period was ended October 1st. One of the more significant things regarding this exposure draft is the introduction of 2 new delivery methods, a blended learning and a nano learning. So it may be something that we might want to talk a little bit more in detail about either early next year, January, or maybe even the May meeting, if there's anything that we need to do or consider as a result of this exposure draft. The licensing database, I believe I mentioned yesterday, we have gone live with a new licensing platform. So as with any system platform changes, there are some challenges, but it did go fairly smoothly, but we are still working through some kinks kind of on a daily basis, but it's going all right. It is going to, your renewals will look different this year. You're going to go through a little bit different system in order to renew your license. In the past, you've received a postcard reminder. This year, you will receive a letter instead, and the letter will contain some information to help you log into an account and renew your license. I've been told there are opportunities for, if you're in a large firm, let's say, for an administrator to connect those in your firm and renew those licenses. So there are some options there. I expect there will be some questions, but the staff will be going through some additional training prior to those letters going out so that we ought to be able to help if there are questions. We are in draft form with the newsletter. NASBA is, we've provided the content. NASBA has laid out that newsletter. And once we finalize that, it will be emailed to all licensees coming up shortly by NASBA. That newsletter used to be mailed, so we are saving a little on postage by emailing it to licensees. It also gives us the opportunity to maybe do it more often. So Karen and I are looking into, whether that's something we might be able to do twice a year rather than annually, or even quarterly once we get in the swing of things. Might be able to do that. Might be an opportunity to communicate a little bit more with licensees. NASBA meetings, the annual meeting is coming up in about a little over a week in Dana Point, California. And Janet is attending along with myself. So hopefully we'll bring back some information in January, so I'm looking forward to it. I had already discussed renewals. The CPE audit, we are in the final phases of the audit. Letters have been sent, a final notice to anyone who had not responded as of yet. I believe those letters were sent a week or so ago. So we will evaluate anyone who's not responded and determine whether that's a complaint that we need to file or not. So you'll see some stats there on the outcome of the audit so far.
Is there a financial penalty if somebody doesn't comply, or is that you have to go through the complaint process to get?
It's my understanding you have to go through the complaint process. So it's failure to respond. The Department of Labor Audit Quality Report, on your iPad, you should see a letter from the Department of Labor, and I just wanted to make sure the board members were aware and bring this to your attention. We received a letter from the Department of Labor highlighting their audit quality report and some concerns that they found there. I believe this topic has been discussed, and any of you who perform work in that area are aware that the deficiencies noted in their report were fairly significant. So there's some concerns there, noting that 40% of plan audits failed to comply with generally accepted auditing standards. It also gives a few stats of how many firms in Tennessee perform these types of engagements. They are simply encouraging boards to be aware of this and to partner with them and encourage firms, obviously, to do proper work and if we find some that are not, to take action. Just kind of an update on the investigation process. I've spent the last couple of months while I've been here just getting to know the process of investigations, complaints, investigations. So we've spent some time implementing a few new procedures just to kind of keep those in line, make sure staff has a better understanding of the process, and hopefully to encourage them to get through the process quicker. So we've implemented a 30-day investigation timeline. If that's not possible for some reason or another, an extension is requested. Weekly status reports coming in on the status of investigations. And legal is working on they've implemented a new request for investigation. So when they ask the investigators to perform investigation, there are more details in that request on exactly what they need in order to work with that particular complaint. So are there any questions on that process?
And a question regarding the investigators. When the investigators are preparing to go out into the field, do they work from the office here?
No. They work from their home. Yes.
How often do you meet with them?
We have a monthly meeting, so at least once a month. Ray is in the office a couple more times simply because he lives closer, and some of his reports are extensive and brings them in rather than submitting them electronically. So at least once a month, if not more. And the last item is the ethics webinar that staff has provided the past couple of years. Has proved to be a little difficult administratively. We have opted not to offer that this year, look into ways to make it a little better, or whether we have resources to really adequately put that on. And that concludes my report. If there are any questions.
Mr. Chairman, I would like to back up to the employee benefit issue, and I wonder if, I guess I would just pose to the board, I wonder if we need to be more proactive in this area. And what I remember from the report, the largest number of problems or errors or omissions was from small firms that are doing only one or two of those. And I guess it's my question, should we take the initiative to notify those firms? I mean, send them a copy of the report, you know, tell them to, you know, is this an area that you want to continue to practice in? If you are, you've got to meet the professional standards. And I mean, I'm not sure the whole script, but, you know, it's obviously coming from people that don't know what they're doing when they're auditing employee benefit plans. And I don't know if it's appropriate for us to maybe ask Wendy or the staff to see what some other states are doing, or, you know, are the boards taking the initiative to go out and tell the people that are creating the problems? Because we've taken a lot of heat for a long time in this area. I mean, it goes back beyond this current report, I think, for several years. And so something that needs some attention, I think. And seems like it's this board's responsibility to, you know, they sent us the letter, and, you know, we need to take the initiative to do something. I don't know exactly what that is, but
I think it's a very good observation. I guess, would it be practical or advisable to take the letter that you provided to the board that was received on August 31st from the Department of Labor, and with a cover letter, and email it to really all the firms? I don't know. I agree with Casey that seems to be primarily a problem with firms that are only doing one or two of these, but which ones those are. So if we just communicate to all the firms and ask them to that this is a focus of attention of DOL, and they need to make sure that they're complying with. Would that,
yeah, I'm not sure exactly what to do. I mean, I would be interested to know what some other states are doing, because this is a problem in the whole profession. It's not just Tennessee, and
Right.
I feel like we could do something proactive here to kind of police this area and ferret out some problems, really. So,
Didn't we have, excuse me, sir.
go ahead.
Didn't we have one of the earlier meetings, maybe 2 meetings ago, when we were discussing this, was there not a directive or some information that we got that DOL was going to step up the audit phase on the people that were doing less than 5 or something, or a magic number that was reported to us that we could include in the body of this letter, saying, you know, they are looking at it, we're giving you, because we care about the profession, we are giving you, the heads up that you got to step up your practice and be sure that you're doing them according to,
I can certainly look into that information.
as a service to our,
Right.
not only the public, but as to our members, saying we're giving you, if you haven't already heard it, here it is.
I do believe that the letter indicates we'll be getting further information maybe on the names of the firms that are actually performing that work in Tennessee. Obviously, that wouldn't cover firms who may pick one up because it looks like a good opportunity. So it may be worth, regardless of whether we know the names or not, getting it out to all firms. Would the board prefer something specific, a communication specifically about that, not embedded in a newsletter, but just on its own?
Since it's email and it's not free, but because of the time involved, but it
Right. I'm
more
not-
pointed so that it does get picked up and we're being
Right.
proactive, as Casey mentioned. I think it's a great idea.
I'm not completely clear on the logistics of whether it's that easy just to email everybody, so, but we can definitely work towards that. We can ask questions at NASBA's meeting as far as what other states are doing regarding this and figure out the best way to communicate with the firms on this, certainly.
Vic Alexander is a good source on what's happened, I think, in it as well, so. And maybe, was it Art Sparks, wasn't he?
Yeah.
He came and actually spoke to us that day.
Yeah, yeah.
Be great, very good. I think reaching out to NASBA and finding out what others are doing would be helpful, but I think the board is very supportive of some proactive step in order to give our licensees, or the firms, a heads up on it.
Yeah.
Other questions or observations regarding Wendy's report? Moving on to committee reports.
Can I get a vote, and mostly because of those meeting dates? I need to have a vote on that. Those are acceptable.
Is there a motion to approve the meeting dates as proposed by Wendy?
So moved.
All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Did any of these change from what was previously posted?
No, so the first three had previously been posted and approved. The last two are new.
Right after the 15th.
Yeah, the 15th
Yeah, I thought about
is-
that yesterday as,
Yesterday was a bad day
yes.
for a meeting.
The first committee report is listed as law and rules. Let's defer that because that's really part of the legal report that Ben is going to cover. So let's go to licensing. And Stephen?
We had a marathon meeting yesterday, as everybody knows.
Just let me remind for the record of anybody that's watching that all the board members that are here today were present during all committee meetings yesterday. So not only did the committees participate in their business, but all board members had the opportunity to raise questions or make observations. So rather than going through all the discussion that took place with the committees yesterday, the chair of the committees will make abbreviated reports and move for action, and it's still, the floor is still open for any debate or discussion regarding any of the matters. But Stephen, I'll let you proceed under that understanding.
Okay. We had several items we discussed yesterday. I'm going to go through those individually and give the committee's recommendation and then ask for a motion at the end. First item we had was, well, actually, I'm going to break out the first item since I've got to recuse myself, if that's okay. The first item we had was a reconsideration from Gabrielle Lorbecki. She submitted an additional information that we requested at the July meeting, asking for credit for online ASPPA exams to be accepted as CPE for her. The committee recommended approving this request and also recommended approving the ASSPPA exam for future CPE for future test takers. So that's I guess I can make the motion. Well, if I'm recusing myself, can I make the motion? I'll just let somebody else make that.
Yeah, I don't think you
Let's
should.
do that. So I'll ask that somebody would make that motion, and I'll recuse myself.
I'll make the motion that we accept it as CPE, and then we also consider changing to accept the ASPPA exam outlined as approved CPE going forward.
I'll second that.
All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Motion passes.
All right, now we'll take the rest of the items now. The next item we had was a request from Mr. Amon Brown to approve the Series 66 exam for CPE credit. The committee recommends approving Mr. Brown's request. Additionally, we discussed the other exams, related exams, and looking at the list of those, recognized that there were a few that were out, I guess they've been, they're no longer offered. You should have a listing of the FINRA exams that are currently approved for CPE. According to our rules, we've got approved the Series 7, 62, 63, and 64. Note that the Series 64 is no longer offered, and the Series 66 is a combination of Series 63 and 65. Based on this, a move that we recommend approving the Series 66 and 65 and removing the 64 from the list since it's no longer offered. Okay. Yeah, I'm just giving the
That's a
recommendation.
recommendation,
That's
and
I'm sorry,
move it.
recommend that.
Yeah, right.
Okay. The next item is an application for reinstatement of revoked license for Tracy Wright. At our last meeting, we requested that she complete the reapplication process, our reinstatement process. Additionally, we had an application for reinstatement of revoked license from Warren H. Pennington. The committee reviewed both of these requests and recommends allowing both to be invited for presentation of the reinstatement application process. The next item we had is a request for acceptance of an intermediate accounting course from South College as upper division credit by Mr. Jonathan Overton. The committee reviewed this and recommends approving Mr. Overton's request that this intermediate accounting course be counted for him as upper level accounting. Let's see. The next item we had was a request for extension of examination scores for CPA exam by Ms. Nadia Jasani. The committee recommends granting this score extension with the requirement of that she take 80 technical hours of CPE to be completed within 2 years. The next item we had was a firm permit renewals. Go ahead.
Get clarification on that. That she'll get her, is it, she has to do the 80 hours prior to
Being
completing
licensed.
it, and then she'll have to go through the regular CPE.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
Okay.
Okay. The next item we had is a firm permit renewals process change. The committee reviewed this and recommends approval of this process change. And the last item, which I don't think requires any kind of motion or not, we had a discussion on state-specific ethics course approval. We reviewed some feedback from one of our members, and the committee reviewed this, and the committee recommends continuing our hold on new state-specific ethics providers as we await the TSCPA's developing program. Any questions about any of that? Any discussion?
Clarify what you said about what we approved on the 2 reinstatements of licenses.
Statements. We recommended allowing both to be invited to the next meeting to begin that process. Additionally, I think I left this off, is we recommended that we invite any affected party or any related party to this that wishes to speak. I think one of the clients, you want to...
That wasn't what I was getting at. The way I understood what we approved was that we would allow their application to go to the next step. In other words, we're going to allow them to apply. We're not approving the application. We're allowing the application to be submitted.
We're just inviting them to the meeting next week, our next meeting to let the process start. Now, there's no guarantee it'll be approved or denied, but that's the next step. Is that
Yes,
accurate?
they've completed the application process, so in essence, there's nothing they will do between now and January. They will just be invited to be present
The
for...
application is complete.
Yes.
more discussion? So I'll make that, I guess, all as a form of a motion and ask for a second.
Second.
Further discussion of the recommendations of the licensing committee? All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. We, do you want to go ahead and do your enforcement committee?
It's not mine.
Oh, I keep doing that. Casey, I'm sorry.
Again, all of the board members were present during the committee meeting yesterday. I'm going to try to go through this report fairly quickly. And I would like to just have a vote to approve the report after we cover all the cases, with the exception of, I believe it's case number 12. We were waiting on legal counsel to make some recommendation there, so I'm going to cover all the others first, and then we'll come back to case number 12. But the legal report, you've got the first 7 cases listed were simply cases where a complaint was filed, the investigation took place, and after the investigation, legal counsel is recommending closure of the case. Case number 8 is a situation where the complaint alleged that the respondent firm was unregistered and performing audits in Tennessee. This was apparently a California firm that had an executive office in Tennessee with no one really present in the office. The firm has since obtained a permit to practice in Tennessee, and so legal counsel is recommending that we close the complaint upon the issuance of a letter of information. Cases 9, 10, and 11 are cases in which legal counsel is recommending closure upon the issuance of a letter of warning. Case number 9 is a situation where the respondent was apparently doing work from home. There was a dispute between the complainant and the respondent, regarding really just clients. I think the respondent had taken a couple of clients from the firm and was terminated, and so basically it's a dispute between the complainant and the respondent. And anyway, there are no previous complaints on respondent or disciplinary actions, and legal counsel is recommending that we close the complaint on issuance of a letter of warning. Case number 10 deals with professional privilege tax. I think there was a situation where the respondent claims that she tried to go inactive and therefore not be subject to the tax, but basically what happened is the respondent paid the professional privilege tax in full. She submitted an affidavit for CPE exemption and to have her status changed to inactive, and so she is now inactive. I think we've verified that, and so we're recommending that case be closed upon issuance of a letter of warning. Case number 11, again, is professional privilege tax case where the actually what's happened is the respondent has actually now paid the professional privilege tax in full, including penalties, and based upon a letter of warning. I'm going to skip over case 12, go to case 13. Case 13 involves really just a number of different issues. There was a 2012 estate tax return that was filed that was examined by the IRS. The respondent failed to provide information to the IRS. In addition, there was a 2013 return that was filed late. Actually, I think the claimant had to get someone else to finally do the 2013 return, but there were penalties and interest involved. This particular respondent had a number of prior issues. with the board, including failure to comply with peer review and so forth. But recommendation of legal counsel is a civil money penalty in the amount of $7,500. The recommendation is we revocation of the respondent's license with authority to settle via consent order, and that order would provide for a civil money penalty of $7,500. Suspension of the license for 1 year, and it contains a provision that if the respondent submits proof of payment to the board of the penalties and interest assessed by the IRS on the decedent's tax returns, the suspension would be reduced from 1 year to 6 months. Case number 14 is recommended for placement into litigation monitoring. This is a situation where the respondent and the claimant have actually got litigation going on between them, and our legal counsel is suggesting that we place this into litigation monitoring status, waiting the disposition of their civil lawsuit. Cases 15 and 16, these are re-presentations. Basically, number 15, the complaint alleged that the respondent failed to pay the professional privilege tax. The respondent closed her CPA license as of October 3rd, 2014 by submitting an affidavit for surrender of the CPA certificate. Respondent's professional privilege tax assessments and penalties have now been removed from the Department of Revenue, and her PPT account closed. Legal counsel again is recommending that we simply close the complaint. Number 16, this is a situation where the respondent firm was using the word accounting in her advertising on the web page. The initial investigation, the respondent failed to cooperate or provide any information really. The new information, we asked the investigators to go back and seek out, the whatever information they could and come back with another recommendation. But basically, the respondent removed the word accounting from her web page in the presence of the investigator, and I think we have since verified that term has been removed from her web page, and legal counsel is simply recommending closure of the complaint. So I guess, Bill, I would ask for a motion to approve legal counsel's report with regard to all of these cases, with the exception of number 12, which we need to discuss a little bit further.
Your motion.
Second.
Okay. Further discussion regarding the report is provided by Casey.
On number 9, was that close and no issue of letter of warning?
Sorry.
No issue of letter of warning on that one? I thought
Read that we would
decided-
issue a letter of warning, yeah.
Pleasure, Janet.
I just had in a note here that I thought we had discussed it, and I can't remember the rationale now, but I thought it was.
Would you just close the matter without any letter?
I think we talked about that, and maybe that was my comment yesterday. This is more of a disagreement between the two parties.
I think that was, what we were discussing, but
Well, if you send a letter of warning, what would the warning be? Don't do this anymore?
Most likely. But at the same time, I do remember we were discussing this. I can't remember what you guys had ultimately decided, whether it was going to be outright closed or closed with a letter of warning.
My recollection is we left it with a letter of warning, but I'm okay with just simply closing the case, because I really think we're reaching out a little far here to,
It's kind of a disagreement between two parties that really no rule was violated. It's just an ethical thing.
So you've changed your motion?
I'll change my motion to amend the disposition of case number 9 to just simply close the case. Complaint.
Yes.
Further discussion? All those in favor of the enforcement report, legal report, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
Going back to case number 12, this is an issue to do with peer review, and the respondent just simply failed to have a peer review within the required period. He has since re-enrolled in a peer review program which should provide that he have a peer review done within 90 days of that date. The recommendation of legal counsel was to for a formal hearing for the revocation of the respondent's firm permit with authority to settle with a consent order upon the respondent's payment of a civil penalty in the amount of $3,000. And we discussed yesterday that penalty should be increased, but we were struggling with the exact wording, and we're going to ask legal counsel to help us with that.
I have something here. I have hard copies for everybody if you'd like, or I can just read it out to you.
It'll be fine. Just
Read it out to you?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Basically kept the first part from the first recommendation and added a piece. So here's how it now reads. Formal hearing for the revocation of the respondent firm's permit with authority to settle via consent order upon A, the respondent's payment of a civil penalty in the amount of $3,000, which is $1,000 for each entire month not enrolled after March 30th, 2015, and B, the respondent's payment of an additional civil penalty in the amount of $1,000 for each month that the respondent has not yet submitted all required materials to the peer reviewer. For calculating this civil penalty, the time period shall start today, October 16th, 2015, and the additional $1,000 shall accrue on the 16th of each subsequent month until the respondent provides sufficient proof to the board that all required materials have been submitted to the peer reviewer. What we're thinking?
Okay with that?
I make a motion to accept that particular.
Okay, we got a motion.
Second that.
Further discussion? All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Thank you. That concludes your report, Casey?
Does conclude my
Okay.
report, yes.
Let's cover what the review with the executive committee did yesterday, and all of you were present for that. We had a
Bogged down in a minute. We're gonna get bogged down in a minute.
discussion led by Wendy regarding the operating results for fiscal 15 that ended June 30th. You have that information. One of the principal issues discussed yesterday, and with input from Brian McCormick of the Assistant Commissioner of Regulatory Boards, was a significant increase in chargebacks or costbacks from the state, and the various contributing factors that led to that. That for the first time in years that we had a deficit, operating deficit of approximately $23,000. Management provided us with information regarding year-to-date operating results with explanations, and also presented a draft of the fiscal 17 budget with explanations. And this is really for our information, and it was discussed yesterday of the various moving factors that could go into changes of this, particularly getting a number of months in this fiscal year behind us, so that we have a better understanding of what actual this current year fiscal year results are before we finalize the budget for fiscal 17. Wendy has reviewed this with the appropriate people in the Division of Regulatory Boards, and they are in concurrence with the general direction of this, the fiscal 17 budget. Again, remind the board that even with the deficit we had this year and the potential deficit in 17, we still have over $750,000 in our reserve. So we're operating on a sound financial basis. Do you want to add anything to the financial review? As is always the case, Wendy provided us information regarding travel, and that was reviewed, and also discussed the results of the performance review and the upcoming sunshine, the
Sunset hearings.
sunset hearing, not sunshine, that will be next Tuesday. So, and the board would be represented by Wendy, Brian McCormick, and myself, and anybody else who would like to attend. I think they have like 6 or 7 scheduled in the afternoon, or it's a good number. So it looks like they don't anticipate any of the regulatory board reviews taking more than like a half an hour. Is that?
That's what I would expect as well.
Right. And as we discussed yesterday, the principal issue was the peer review, and all indications are that the proposed plan to ask for a change in the law regarding that would address the concern of the legislative auditors. Any other questions regarding the activities of the, or do you want to add anything to?
I partly have this in later in the agenda, but I wonder if it would be appropriate to take a vote on the board's support for legislative change, and specifically in what regard with the peer review. And we can leave that till later in the agenda, or we could do that now.
Elicit any input? Would anybody like to make that motion? How we deal with the need to, or advisability of changing the peer review process?
Sure. So the finding in the audit, let me get to it real quickly. I had this problem yesterday too. Okay. The finding was, under its current structure, the Tennessee State Board of Accountancy is limited in its ability to oversee the program. The management's response within the audit was that the board would consider their support for the recommendation made in the audit, which was to support a potential legislative change to remove the confidentiality requirements with regards to the results of peer review. That would assist the board more in overseeing directly firms, licensees that perform a test work. Does that help, Casey? Okay.
Can I ask a question real quick before we do that? What is your, I mean, you've had a lot of experience with it, but if we remove the confidentiality provisions, it seems to me that there would be a lot of professionals that would not want to do peer review because they would open themselves up to some type of lawsuit or some other type of discredit or something from the folks who they were reviewing if the review ended up not being a good thing. So are we talking about limiting the confidentiality exception just to the board and somehow making sure that that's outside the purview of the Open Records Act? Or
I think that's an important point, Gabe. And yes, the making the documents available just to the board, and those would be the results of the peer review. There's also confidentiality provision in there now with regards to peer reviewers, the committee, and the work product as a result of a peer review. So there, in my opinion, we would want to probably preserve that if we can. And so I would look for the board to support that as well. You know, once something becomes public record, then we do run into those kind of issues. So making the results available to this board to help in their enforcement process, I think, is important, but whatever we can do to limit exposure to the committees and the reviewers is also, in my opinion, important.
How does that work? If we're discussing somebody comes up, if a person comes up, do we go into an executive session or what? Or because anything we discuss is obviously public record.
I would comment that it'd probably be handled the way we deal with enforcement actions now. It's on a no-name basis. We only review the facts. And is that
Right. I mean, I think it would be handled the same way.
right?
But technically, we wouldn't have specific knowledge about an individual. We would just have the facts presented to us. Okay, that's fair.
The two attorneys in the room are nodding their head, yes.
The comment that I would make is that your peer review, the guidance as to how you do the peer review is currently in your rule. And I had wondered oftentimes is that it seems that the rule was created that would shield the board from getting any of those documentations because specifically in your statutes you don't have an exemption to the Open Records Act, exactly what you said, Mr. Roberts. So going forward in that, it would just be an easy statutory change, which would state within the accountancy code, which would be that the board could receive these types of peer review documents, however they would be considered confidential, and that would take care of it.
Second.
Further discussion? Are you okay with that, Wendy?
Yes, I would like to ask a question once this vote is complete. I'd like to ask a
Okay.
follow-up question once this vote is complete.
Okay. All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
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 All those opposed, motion carries.
Okay, my follow-up is, we still have the requirement of a peer review oversight committee within the law and then specifics within the rule. Is this something that the board would like to continue with the statutory change? I do believe it's NASBA's recommendation that you have an oversight function regardless of whether the documents are confidential to the board or not. So I'd like some thoughts on that.
I think the observation was made yesterday that it is very difficult to recruit qualified reviewers, and that the compensation is minimal to accomplish it in an appropriate way. So we would have a continuing challenge in that regard, but I would like to have further input and discussion from the board.
Bill, I guess I feel like we need to look at how we can change the present rule or statute, whatever we need to change to really accommodate what's practical for us to try to do. I mean, I don't have a problem with an oversight function. I almost feel like that needs to come from this board, or can it be accomplished through, I know we've had reports from the TSCPA who administers the peer review program. Is that sufficient oversight, to continue to have those kind of reports on an annual basis as to, what the AICPA and what the TSCPA, I just don't see the need for us to have to go out and repeat all of that, but I think we certainly need to be informed about how the peer review program is being conducted and be comfortable with the quality that's going in there. But if we need to change the law and the rules, we need to that needs to be part of this process, because I just don't think it's workable the way it's written right now.
Other comments?
Would it? Do you think it would work to satisfy our obligations if we were able to modify the requirement so that, I think I'm using the term correctly, the PROC, is that right? We have the oversight committee, becomes another subcommittee of us, kind of like licensing or enforcement, and that's the committee that deals directly with the records that come over if we get them, and then they make recommendations to the board.
I think that's something to look into. I do believe that a member of the board can't actually participate in those meetings, but part of what I'm thinking and want to look into is, could we have a member of this board, maybe a member of the executive committee, let's say, and maybe potentially one of the investigators? Would it make sense to allow one of them to attend one or more meetings, report back to the board member, who then could report to the board, and would that satisfy an oversight function? The current rule, I believe, requires accounting and auditing experience. I'm not sure whether it says current or not. And then the board has approved some additional requirements, which talk about peer reviewer experience, et cetera. But the board could probably review that, change those requirements, or simply remove those extra requirements and just go by what the law says. And, maybe that's a way we can do an oversight function. I do feel with NASBA's recommendation and Casey's thoughts, it seems like we should have some kind of oversight function, but looking at how we can make that work in a different way.
The TSCPA's peer review, doesn't that provide oversight?
We can certainly accept that, I think, as an oversight function, simply because, just from my knowledge of it, the AICPA comes in and does an extensive oversight every 2 years of the program, and I would be comfortable with that.
Well, and you've provided those
Yes.
reports to the board in the past, and to do anything beyond that would seem to me to be redundant. I think it's your point that I don't know how much overkill you can do on it, and particularly because of what appears to the ASCPA says that the Tennessee Society peer review program is operating properly.
Correct. And those reports are public. We can continue to ask for those to be presented once a year by the TSCPA. We would just need to probably work on, if we move to change the law from a confidentiality standpoint, we need to look at that as well to make sure we can maintain compliance with what we've got there.
Do we need a motion in that regard, or what? You have it appears a clear consensus of the board to support that process.
That was part of my original motion.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Casey. I knew you ever had intended that. So I believe that covers all committee issues. Then we did not have a law and rules meeting yesterday because we've got the report from legal today about several changes they're proposing, and that committee we had an unusual member absentee problem yesterday. So, but Ben, are you going to walk us through this information that you provided us yesterday?
The memorandum regarding the
Right.
prohibited services and titles and designations.
All right.
Well, assuming everybody read it, are there any questions that anyone has with regard to it? Thought maybe that'd be a good place to
It
start.
really looks like it was written by an attorney.
It was written by one and vetted by a few others.
Yeah, I don't speak Latin, so there's some things I need.
Sure, absolutely. Any questions at all?
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to say for the record, as a lawyer, that I thought it was very well written, very thorough, and it obviously took a lot of time for you all to do this, and I definitely appreciate that.
Could you summarize, really, at the end of the day, what the issues are and your recommendation?
Absolutely. Let me just go over to my statutes. So this is something that the board had requested at the last meeting because I think there was some confusion. I do believe, Mr. Eldridge, you indicated there were some staff accountants, I think, at your particular firm, and you're like, well, do I have to change their business cards? And everybody was kind of confused, including legal. And so we dove into this pretty deep, as you can see, and started with the statutes. And really, the main issues are what differentiates a licensee from a non-licensee in terms of two things: the services that they are allowed to perform and offer to perform, and two, the particular titles and designations they're allowed to utilize. That's the gist of this entire memo. The main statute throughout the entire memorandum is 62.1.13, and really that delineates the A of that statute states what licensees can do and what anyone can do. And it reads, only licensees may issue a report on financial statements of any other person, firm, organization, or governmental unit, or otherwise offer to render or render any attest service. So that's the realm of accounting which is exclusive to certified public accountants and public accountants. The second part states that this particular statute, this restriction, does not keep anyone, that's person, entity, licensee, or non-licensee, from being able to perform by any person of other services involving the use of accounting skills, including the preparation of tax returns, management advisory services, and the preparation of financial statements without the issuance of reports thereon. And I think through the last legal report and this legal report, there are instances in which some entities are doing bookkeeping or tax preparation. And there's instances in which they are advertising that by saying, we are accountants, or we are offering accounting. We'll do your accounting for you, although they do not do attest, audit, or issue reports. And that's where we get in this weird area where we're like, well, can they do that? What can they legally do, and what can they legally say they do? We've had instances in which we've had people change things and say that they were bookkeepers as opposed to accountants, and that's really what this memorandum addresses. And so at the end of the day, with regard to services, audit, attest, issuing reports, that's exclusive to licensees. Anything else is fair game.
So someone that has a sign on their window that says accounting services, or we are accountants, but they do not provide any attest or audit services, that is permissible.
That's an interpretation. There's two different interpretations. That's where we get to the title and designation. The services they're allowed to do, they might just say we're doing bookkeeping. But with the title and designation, that's where you can look at the, I think it's H2 of this statute, where we say, and that's the second part of the memorandum, where that there's really two interpretations. One interpretation is that any use of the word accountant or accounting implies that this particular individual has special competency or training or licensure. The other interpretation is that there has to be words in conjunction or in connection with the term accounting or accountant, which then creates the implication. I gave some examples in there. I think one was like, if I call myself a master accountant, that may imply that you have some sort of special competency, or I mean that would be a determination that the board would make on a case-by-case basis. So on the one hand, it's just the use in it of itself creates the implication. The other hand, which is the second interpretation, is that there's got to be something a little bit more.
Back to my question, can somebody put a sign in their window that says that they're an accountant when they're not licensed?
Two jurisdictions that we know of, absolutely, from the case law that we've read. This would be, the board is permitted, I think, by statute to interpret the statute how it sees fit, right? And so if the board thinks that, no, this statute is saying there's an outright prohibition on the use by non-licensees of the terms accountant or accounting, then that's a determination that the board can make.
Why can't we operate under the H2 provision that says, shall assume or use, you can't use the words accountant or accounting? I mean, that's what I didn't understand is when I read it last night, you've got, was it G that said you could, and then H2 all of a sudden says you can't?
Well, no, G says you can't also. G, basically, in the analysis, we're saying, if no one can use accountant or accounting, then G is just completely pointless. Because G is saying, hey, look, here are these other words in association with accountant, chartered accountant, registered accountant, accredited accountant, which create confusion. It confuses people thinking that someone might be a CPA or a PA.
I mean, I think if you've got someone that says Bob's accounting firm, he's not a CPA, to me, that's misleading as well, because I would assume that they're doing accounting work. There's a difference between accounting work and bookkeeping work.
But that's the
opinion.
statute, the very beginning of statute A
Help me
says that.
understand that.
I guess in the eyes of, if I'm looking at it as a public person, I'm going to look at it as accounting as someone that's certified. I associate accountant and accounting as someone that's certified. Bookkeeping would be more someone that's keeping someone's books or records. It's not necessarily a certified person. I mean, if that's not the case, then we need to change our name to the State Board of Attestation, because that's really the only jurisdiction. I mean, I'm being serious. That's what I read last night. And if I'm a practitioner, why do I even want to be certified? I can pass the test and say I passed the CPA exam, but then I can go be called. I don't have to worry about these fictitious name rules, and I don't have to worry about CPE, and I don't have to worry about anything. I can do everything but auditing, which I would like to know the statistics of firms that are registered firms that aren't doing attestation work. I imagine that's a pretty large number.
We have roughly 2,200 registered firms, and from my past experience, there are about 850 that undergo peer review.
So
So
roughly two-thirds are not. So if I'm those firms, why do I even want to be registered with the State Board of Attestation? as
Because
we
then
call
they
it?
can utilize CPA, PA, certified public accountants within their name.
But I can tell everybody I passed it and I'm just qualified. Or, you take a practitioner that's been a CPA for a long time. Everybody's going to assume they're a CPA regardless if they drop the certification or not. I just think we've got to be very careful on this, that we're not going to water down our purpose and water down the function and I hate to use the word prestige, that's all that comes to mind, but the benefit of somebody actually being certified and having to be maintaining the CPE and being trained. And we talked about this yesterday about somebody that passed it 10 years ago, and we had a huge concern that they weren't up to speed, and that would have a negative impact on the public. So that's what I want to be very careful about here, that we're not watering down the accounting profession and just allowing everybody to do whatever.
And can you confirm, Ben, that what Stephen is saying is how we've been interpreting it?
That's correct.
We've been interpreting it
As an outright prohibition.
right.
If I can.
What you're really saying is if we interpret it as an outright prohibition, and that's the board's choice, then if somebody challenges that, we'll just have to address that at that time. But there's probably more than a negligible chance that they might prevail.
I think, Mr. Stewart, you summed it up very well. Very well. I think we are trying to tell you is that there is, the way that we have read the statute, there is two reasonable interpretations of the statutes. And when we looked at other state statutes, Ben did an excellent job of researching that. He found in other states that their boards were found that their statutes similar to that were found to be unconstitutional. One was an outright prohibition of those two words. And so they modified their statutes to say, well, the term accountant and accounting must also somehow, within the board's discretion to determine that it implies that they have some kind of specialized competence or skill. We also looked, and it looks like the UAA model language has changed the way that their language is to support the latter of what we said, which is that it would have to actually use the word accountant and accounting and imply some kind of specialized skill or competence. But that's what other states have done or what are doing. And so when looking at our statute, we recognize it has not been modified there are two reasonable interpretations. The board could make either interpretation that it would like. What we wanted to point out is that the first interpretation of the outright prohibition does come with some non-negligible risk out there. And we wanted you all just to be aware of that. But we're not necessarily outright condoning one interpretation or another because it's up to the board's discretion. Our responsibility lies as to what are the possible ramifications of that.
If we continue operating under our position now, our interpretation now, is there something we need to do or can do to strengthen our position on that to protect what we've got?
Well, you could always, and I don't want to take away anything that Ben's saying, because he did an excellent job preparing
agree.
all
It
of
was
this
well written.
for you all. He really did. And Ben and I, when we were discussing, we said the board could always really create, I don't know, you could create a rule, or your interpretation could be is that look at these things, you can look at these things as to how they're using the word accountant or accounting and look at additional facts. In what context are they using it? And it's up to you all. You could decide, now this is prohibited, not just because the word accountant or accounting is used, but because it implies that has some kind of specialized knowledge or skill. Does that make sense? You could look at each one of them on a case-by-case basis and determine on each case-by-case basis that it's a violation. That would be another buffer of.
Looking at, was it California and Maryland, I think? Is there something in their statute that could have been written differently to have prevented the judge's opinion? I think it was I don't know, I remember the exact details, but they basically overruled it and said it was unconstitutional, violation of First Amendment rights or something.
He did, that those two courts found that it was a violation of the commercial free speech, and there's the test that goes through commercial free speech. I think both of those opinions really focus on the idea that the word accountant and accounting itself are words that are used within the CPA statutes, but they're not necessarily defined as an exact activity that's been going on. Generally, the statutes say in order to do a test work or whatnot, you have to be a CPA in general or whatnot, a certified public accountant. But we recognize at the same time, those are different jurisdictions. Those aren't state of Tennessee. Those aren't even, they wouldn't even be in the same federal courts as in Tennessee. And those opinions were slightly outdated, but when we saw that the UAA had changed, we thought, well, there was some discussion within the industry and they thought that was the way to go. So we wanted to at least let you know what other courts had said, but it's not been determined here within this jurisdiction, absolutely not.
I appreciate the writing. I thought it was extremely well written, especially as a non-attorney that doesn't speak Latin.
I have long struggled with somebody that goes to college 4 or 5 years, majors in accounting, doesn't sit for the exam or can't pass the exam, and they're not doing audit or test work, and they can't call themselves accountants. I think they are accountants. I consider accounting and bookkeeping to be synonymous. With all due respect, Steve, I know there can be a difference between the two. What do you do with individuals that are in the corporate environment that are staff accountants, senior accountants? Are those permitted titles?
In private agencies, though,
Well,
and that's not that's just the job title, and they're not holding themselves out to the public because they're doing work for that entity would be the difference I would see in it.
You think I can move my business cards back and call them staff accountant, senior accountant, and use those titles instead of something different? I can call my non-certified auditor that works at our firm, I can call them a staff accountant now, or a senior
I would
accountant.
be okay with that.
Which, I mean, I would argue that a senior accountant kind of gives a impression that they're a upgraded accountant, I mean.
But that's what they are in the professional world. A senior accountant is a senior
I
accountant.
mean, I agree with Bill. If you have a degree in accounting, why couldn't you call yourself an accountant? if you have a BS degree from University of Tennessee, are you not an accountant when you graduate? If you have a BS degree in accounting?
I don't disagree with that. I'm just concerned the public's got a different, in my opinion, the public's going to look at that and say, oh, you're an accountant. You're a CPA.
I think that's why we have the designation
No,
certified public
I understand
accountant.
that. I'm just saying the general public person say, oh, your CPA's here. I've heard that a million times. Your,
Well, I have
your
too, but-
CPAs are here.
Yeah.
And there's
I agree
staff
with,
accountants.
what Stephen is saying. The public,
And that's what
they
we're protecting.
do interchangeably use those terms, and I think that if we're looking out for the public interest, then it's our responsibility to be sure that it's clear what those terms mean for the public.
Well,
And also the point that he was making about our profession in general, I think that could get us on a slippery slope to kind of watering down our profession in general.
I agree with that. I read this and I'm not sure I understood very much of it, but comments were helping this morning. But it just seems like we don't really need to change what we're doing right now. I mean, taking the risk that somebody could challenge us, if they wanted to. Change what we're doing. Okay. There's some other issues, and I don't know if we plan to get into those, and that is, to me, this more is dealing with firm names, use of the term accountant or accounting in a firm name. But, one of the concerns I've expressed before is somebody that's a CPA that wants to go back and work part-time during busy season doing individual tax returns, and they literally work in the back office. I mean, somebody shoves work under the door to them, and they do it and push it back out, and they're certified, but they never sign anything. They never hold themselves out as a CPA. They're just working for some practitioner there. And yet this board has taken the position that they have to meet the CPE requirements, have an active certificate, when they could go across the street to H&R Block and do exactly the same thing and not have to meet those requirements. And we're really creating a unlevel playing field for small practitioners out there that are trying to get their work done through the use of part-time seasonal people. When if someone comes to work for them, they know they're going to have the CPE, spend the money to meet the CPE requirements and maintain professional privilege tax. So is that beyond the scope of this discussion here? I just don't see the logic in that. It's a totally unlevel playing field.
I think it's just a separate discussion. It's just two different issues. And we talked about that one a little bit, that issue previously.
Tony, I think it is addressed in some. Talk about that. It is in some of the inactive section of the rule changes that Ben is proposing.
And I'll tell you, the only prohibition is going to be on the use of the title or designation, meaning your company name or your actual personal title. They can put on their website, it's not prohibited by statute, that they offer accounting.
So I'm a new graduate from college. I go and pass the CPA exam, but I never get certified. And I set up Stevens Accounting Service. And I put on my website, I passed the CPA exam just like every other guy, every other person that's done it out here. I pay no privilege tax. I can call it any fictitious name I want it to be. I can do anything I want to do, to be honest with you. And there's nobody governing me. There's nobody because I'm not certified.
Well, with the exception of you couldn't call it, I mean, under the current interpretation by the board, you could not call it Stevens Accounting Service.
But
You
I'm
could
just
call it
saying
Stevens Financial Service, and then it says on the first page of the website, I offer accounting.
If I challenged it potentially and I found the judge that said, hey, I moved to California, I can do it. To me, it's a problem that's just lurking out there because, again, I feel strongly that the public sees accounting and CPA it's synonymous. I mean, it's one and the same in their eyes.
No, Stephen, I respectfully disagree. I think when you see the word accountant, and it's not certified public accountant, the absence of certified is so conspicuous.
I've been at many clients' offices doing audit work, and the first thing they say is the CPAs are here. The CPAs are here.
Hired a CPA firm.
But the CPAs are here. They're referring to that group that's there,
Okay.
that half or more are not certified, and they just assume because they work at an accounting firm that they're certified.
Well, that same group says when you come in to do a review that the auditors are here too.
I don't, that's what I'm just saying. And I think that's a misconception. That's true, but I think that people look at accountants.
You go
and
into a
CPA is one and the
hospital,
same.
how do you differentiate between the physician and the PA, the physician assistant?
That's another issue that they're fighting.
Well, but.
That's a big issue. There's a misconception with
No,
them.
but again,
It's the person with the stethoscope around their next to the doctor, according to, and actually that's the opposite.
Bill, I respectfully agree with Stephen, because
that's fine.
rather than disagree with you, but
Hey, I'm very
I
used to
really,
being in
I mean, this
minorities.
just shows, I think, I mean, I do, I tend to agree more with what Stephen is saying.
I've had been certified, I passed the CPA exam with great difficulty 40-some years ago. I have never had certified public accountant on my card. I'm very proud of being a CPA, but the firm I was with didn't put certified public accountant on anybody's card. Most firms major firms don't call themselves certified public accounting firms. They provide a test and audit services, but the reason why they don't is they provide tax services and management consulting services and valuation and all kinds of other services. So it's not exclusively a CPA firm.
Did your clients assume you were a CPA or not?
When they hired us to do an audit, the engagement partner had to be a CPA.
I'm not going to disagree with any of y'all, but I can see both sides for sure. And one of the things that I liked in the memo was the California case, where when instead of doing an outright prohibition on just the single use of the word accounting or accounting, there was an affirmative requirement to say when you do that and you use those terms, you have to put a disclaimer that says you're not a certified public accountant. So it seems to me like that would perhaps address your concerns that you have, because you can't just use it without also the associated disclaimer. And if they did use it without the disclaimer, then that brings them within the purview of our disciplinary actions. Right.
And in my research, I did find that there are some jurisdictions that do implement some safe harbor type language where it would say, Stevens Accounting Services not licensed by the State Board of Accountancy in Tennessee.
I just do one of those commercials where it says Stevens Accounting Firm, and then it goes, at the very end. And that covers it, and that's legit. But
yeah. We actually have other programs have similar type rules where it has to be conspicuous, and then they write very specific things. Your car commercials, motor vehicle commission, spends a lot of times, and we have great conversations. Luckily, a lot of the dealerships are represented by good law firms here in town that tell them, oh no, you can't do that. No, you're going to have to slow that down, make that bigger. Let's read the math there and see if it actually works out. But I think this an option that the board could do is could take its original position and create a rule that says you can't use the word accountant or accounting unless you do use some kind of safe harbor position, language underneath that. I think you could do that just sitting here listening to the conversation. It could. I think last spring there was some concern. I will tell you about a case that had some facts that hasn't actually been discussed in this today with this discussion, which was, and I can't remember the exact name, but there was a complaint open against the firm that used the word accounting services. And there was, I believe, not an official complaint open, but at some point in time last year, there'd been a letter sent to them saying you will cease and desist using this word or whatnot. And come to find out that it was a very large corporation that was doing business not in Tennessee but many other states, and their attorney had approached him and says, we actually don't do any accounting services. We are a human resources company, and we link up companies to accounting firms. So we help them find the correct accounting firm for what their needs are. But if you call us and ask for an account, we don't have any on staff here. What we do is we provide services for finding someone, and their name was Accounting Services, and they outright just told us if this is your position, then we'll just file suit against the board immediately. And that was one of our concerns, was that the facts were not good in that scenario, because they told us we don't do any accounting work whatsoever. We don't we don't hire accountants, we don't hire CPA firms or anything like that. We will just for a fee find the correct people for you. So that was the one scenario that we found where we're slightly nervous, because there were no real good facts that we could show as to why anybody potentially could even be harmed by using that word within their title.
So it sounds to me like there's a couple of options, and you all are telling us that we have the right as the board to decide what we want to do, and then you all as our attorneys are going to back us up on that. Without actually giving it to us, if the answer is yes, do you have a recommendation?
No, I mean, generally the attorneys really don't. Well, what we can tell you is, our scope of what we do is tell you what the potential possibilities are and what is the risk involved in those. Generally, when we give recommendations, we can tell you what the department would recommend or what the administration would recommend based on, how risk averse they are in that scenario. I would think that I can't speak exactly for them, but my understanding is that they were leaning towards the.
Before you do that,
May not even say it now.
I'm happy to do that, but I would think that, in my opinion, would fall under legal advice, and we should go into executive session if you're going to tell us what that recommendation is, because of the fact that you've told us there's a non-negligible litigation risk based on what we decide to do. And that's not my decision to make, but it seems to me like we're getting very much to that level.
I just don't, well, respectfully, I just don't see where we would have any potential anticipation of litigation, since we don't have any of those. Complainants aren't out there anymore. We don't actually have an open complaint against someone like that. Or is there a live controversy?
Okay, in my opinion, yesterday, one of the enforcement actions was an update on us sitting by somebody, as they called their webmaster, to take the word accountant and accounting off their website. And this was an individual, as I understand, that was failing to cooperate with us on multiple previous occasions. And if I'm that individual and I check this record, as soon as I hear this, I'm going to file a lawsuit against the board, because we're talking about taking a position that we've now informed the public is a non-negligible risk of litigation, specifically relating to me having to incur the cost and expense of changing my website. So that's where I'm coming from.
Right, yeah, I understand. It's one of the burdens of the.
But using the case yesterday, and I thought of that too, I would suggest I wouldn't do that, because all you're doing is filing some litigation. There's no assurance you're going to win. I mean, you've got the cost and the time to do that. I guess I just don't feel like we need to do anything here, maybe until the issue comes up. It's like we know what the risks are. We agree they're maybe non-negligible, but we don't have a threat out there right now. Let's wait until it happens. Why deal with it before it happens? If there were something we could do in the law to change the wording to protect us, maybe we go ahead and do that. But what I'm hearing, if we change the law, it would be more to say you can't use the word accounting without putting this disclaimer in there. And
Why are we talking about it? Did it come up because of a question, or?
I think it's because we've all been confused about it,
Okay.
Larry, about, you know, where we really stand. And I mean, this helps me understand better what the issues are. Maybe I understand what you're saying. I'm thought about that too. But I just think this issue is going to come up with small firms with limited resources, and I'm not going to file a lawsuit against the State Board of Accountancy unless I've just got really deep pockets and I'm doing accounting as a sideline, or something. I think we're on reasonable ground here to move forward and keep doing what we're doing.
I'm not willing to put a third of our members on an unlevel playing field from everybody else in the state. I mean, to me, it's just not the right thing to do, in my opinion. I feel like we've got a good position with where we've been interpreting this. And if somebody wants to challenge it, that's so be it. But I feel like we're operating under the correct interpretation, in my opinion, based on our duty to protect the public from incorrect interpretation of people's advertising or marketing efforts, or how they present themselves. I guess the question I would ask is, it kind of goes with what Larry said, where this came up. I think we've just had various questions have come up over the past few meetings. What is our position then on business cards, for example? Because that was a question I think I originally had. If a firm wants to call their non-certified accounting staff accountant, is that an issue, or is that something that we would send an investigator, or if somebody filed a complaint because a non-certified person had staff accountant on their business card? Seems to me if we're going to not make a change, then that would not be allowable practice.
I agree with you.
If you have, you're saying you want to let your staff accountants use staff accountant, is that right? Or
No, I don't now. We had it and we changed it to
we were going to say, because if you did that internally, I
Associate
think
is
that
what
would
we
be
use.
fine. But the moment that individual hands that card to somebody, they're then holding themselves out as an accountant. And then that would fall contrary to the board's interpretation.
I agree. I just want to be consistent with what we're doing it, and I think that's how we've always interpreted it. At least that's my understanding. That's why we spent the money to make the change to do it. Okay, that answers my question.
Is that the board's position, that we would, if we became aware of a firm that had business cards that said staff accountant, and for non-certified folks, that we would have a cease and desist or something like that for that firm?
What you're recommending, Stephen? To Larry's question.
So would that be our position if we became aware of firms who had business cards for non-certified staff that said staff accountant, that we would tell them to quit that or cease and desist that? Or
I would think so. At least that was my interpretation within our firm, how we did it, or our interpretation.
So in that situation, if the firm was a CPA firm and it had all the licenses and permits to do that, would there not be an argument that would say that, yeah, if I was holding out Gabe Roberts' staff accountant, but it didn't have a firm name on it, that's one thing. But if it says Gabe Roberts staff accountant, Stephen Eldridge CPA firm, it seems to me like we're inviting a lawsuit by a bunch of companies who are properly licensed and permitted, and then have individuals that they call internally staff accountants. So it seems to me like I'm not trying to muddy the water, but I don't think this is as bright line of an issue as we're talking about. While I totally understand the concept, I think we're inviting some significant legal trouble about this because of the inclusion of both a properly licensed individual or firm and then someone who may not be licensed but who's called an accountant.
I agree with what you're saying about the staff accountant, that type of issue. And I'm thinking that may be widely used by firms who are headed by their licensed CPA firms. But it does seem consistent that if they're not a licensed CPA firm, that there may be an opportunity to prohibit that use then.
And so again,
And still be consistent.
I'm never.
The card issue, you're saying that if you're work for a CPA firm and you're not certified, you can't tell your mother that you're an accountant?
I agree. I think
I think we
if you
have
have a
just-
degree in accounting and you can't call yourself an accountant, then the universities need to change the name of that degree.
Well, I mean, with all due respect, just because you go to law school, I don't think you can hold yourself out as a lawyer if you haven't passed the bar exam. So, I mean,
Or any
what
other
my point,
profession.
though, what I was getting to is two reasons. One, I've never been one to back down from a fight if we have a legal reason to pick the fight. I'm talking about holding yourself out to the public. And two, it goes back to my question. If we're going to resolve this, I believe there's a significant threat of litigation. Are we sure we can't go into executive session to get legal advice?
Quite honestly, before I would say that we can do that, I have to get clearance through my boss. That is a very, very sticky topic here within the department. But I will go and ask and come back with an answer whether or not they would support that, just because as soon as we do that, somebody could potentially file anything regarding that. And so let me go ask.
Is something we could do the research on for the next meeting, and so that you're not rushed to get a clearance on something, so that we can go into executive session if it is, talk about all the scenarios and try to determine, because of potential litigation, that, or is,
I mean,
I'm not trying to kick the can down the road. I'm with Gabe. I'd like for it to stop.
We got this material yesterday afternoon. I think the discussion has been very healthy. I'd be interested in observations from Wendy and the investigators on the topic. It's been my understanding that there has been an aggressive search for, in yellow pages or driving up and down the street looking for accountant signs. I think we need to get it clarified. Either let's keep doing that, and if that's the pleasure of the board, or I would rather I don't want to delay because of deliberation, but let's do it right. And I guess my question is that should we get more input from the society, which probably I would speculate would support Stephen and your position. Anyway, what's the pleasure of the board? Do you want to pursue the question of an executive session today?
If you're asking me, Mr. Chairman, I don't necessarily think we have to, but I just want, if we're going to get some legal advice and try to get, I think we need legal advice to resolve this. And if we're going to try to resolve it, I think we need to see if we can get that legal advice in executive session. If we want to wait until the next meeting, I think that's totally appropriate, because we've all had this for less than 24 hours to digest. I think that's an appropriate response.
And we are missing 3 board members.
And that's a very good point. We're missing 3
agree.
board members, including the newly appointed public member.
I need to brush up on my Latin, too, and go back and reread this a little bit.
So are we in agreement that we're going to explore the matter further, ask for legal counsel to determine whether they can consult with us in executive session, and defer the matter until the January meeting? Absence of a motion to the contrary, will be our plan of action. Cindy, are you okay with that? Investigators, what are you going to do about your search at the yellow pages? Okay. So I think that concludes the discussion of that matter. And that was really the only thing on legal, right?
There are now some proposed rule changes.
Okay, right, okay. And that's the second part of this material.
Could I ask, what's the source of these proposed rule changes? Is it coming from the document we just discussed, or is it other things the Rules and Laws Committee has recommended?
Of a variety of things. I do remember at the last meeting, we were asked to review the rules for inconsistencies or confusing areas. There was a couple things that I believe the board voted on a year ago, October, that were not actually implemented into the rules. So there's that. And then, like I said, just some kind of general housekeeping.
Kind of pulling together all that.
Yeah, yes, sir.
Okay.
But do any of these proposed changes differ from our view that we've been into our interpretation of the rules and laws?
No, sir. So
Use the word accounting or accountant.
there's not actually any rules with regard to the title and designation, quite like we do have in the statute. There are some rules which tie into the beginning part of the memorandum, which is only in regard to the services that one can legally offer. We have some areas, I think, which are confusing at best with regard to inactive licensees. And so, in essence, the way the rules read, and once someone goes inactive, aside from digging ditches for the city, there's like not a lot that they can do.
Like for example, rule 002001-.12. I noticed the change was establish a new office or location. It used to say providing accounting services. Now it says engaged in the practice of public accountancy. Seems like that change was the result of this.
Well, no, I mean,
We're going from just saying accountancy to public accountancy.
Do we want to go through them one by one and let Ben kind of explain where, why we worked on this particular one, or?
Yes.
okay. So should we just start at the beginning? Mr. Eldridge. So,
And then we'll get to that one.
Okay.
So the very first one, this is a definition of professional service found within Chapter 3, and those definitions in Chapter 3 are exclusive to Chapter 3 unless otherwise indicated. However, the term professional service is found in other areas, and so we thought for consistency it would be nice to take this definition, move it to Chapter 1, and therefore it's applicable to all the chapters. Yes, sir.
Past 10 o'clock before you go through this.
Oh, should we take a break?
I think
Cool.
helpful. Thank you. And you started to explain how we have this next.
Yes, sir, the
report.
proposed rule changes.
Yeah.
And I figure we'll just go through them, if it's okay with the board,
Right.
just one by one. And of course, I'd love to have any questions anybody has.
Basically, these are things that the board has suggested that needed to be, that we've approved a change, or that said, let's consider a change, and you're following up on board recommendations, or where there's been clear inconsistencies as to what we're doing versus what's in the rules. And this is just rules, this is not the laws.
That's correct, sir.
The other question I have is that after a good number of years on the board, about a year ago, I discovered that we have a set of policies out there. Were the policies ever considered in this?
I didn't.
Okay, that
That
was called a
is
pop
news to
quiz.
me.
That was called a pop quiz. Okay.
That is news to me.
Sometime-
I would love to see those policies.
They're on your iPad.
Are they?
But
Let's not get into that.
We don't need to do that
But
right now.
some other time.
So that's a to-do, I
Right.
believe. There's a motion for legal counsel to review those. So yes, shall we start with the first?
Yeah.
Okay. The first is Rule 0020-01-.011. We would like to amend the definitions in Chapter 1 to include a definition from Chapter 3. Reason being is that we found areas in the other chapters where this particular defined term was utilized, and therefore to bring clarity to all of the rules, instead of this definition only being applicable to Chapter 3, when we move it and add it to Chapter 1, it's applicable to all the rules, all the chapters.
Let me suggest to the board that as Ben goes through these, that we group them or to have a motion for approval, like in this first section, but if somebody has an objection to one, then we'll pull it out and then vote on it separately. So, go ahead.
Okay, so that's the first one. And do we have any questions on the first one? Okay, I'll move on to the second one. The second one is a change that the board asked us to do at the last meeting with regards to the surrendering of the actual physical paper license, which we stated that it expires anyway, that to require a licensee who's going inactive or closing out their license to submit this piece of paper, which terminates at a particular date, is not necessarily.
This is the license and not their certificate.
That's correct. We have the certificate later
Yeah,
on.
right.
Yes, sir. So that's the second rule. It's just striking out the portion with where the licensee would be required to surrender the license to the board. Are there any questions on this one? Okay. The next rule is a clarification. I believe there's some confusion on this rule in the past where it was interpreted as being applicable to CPAs as a licensee, but then a PA firm. But really, this is under the firm section of the rules, and this was just to clarify that these things are exclusive to firms and applicable to firms only, not to the licensees.
Questions? Go for it.
Okay, and actually, all right. The next one, I believe this is the one that Mr. Eldridge had a question on. This was a change that, as I reviewed the rules, only firms providing a test work, i.e. engaged or utilizing the particular CPA's designation in their title, are required to have a firm permit, and so this would narrow this particular rule to only requiring those firms have a new office or location using that particular title or offering a test work would have to notify the board. Questions on this one?
I have one question. If that new location is not offering a test services, are we saying that the new location does not have to get a permit? If it's the same firm, but that office is just tax services or?
So long as the title of the company does not include prohibited language, then you are correct. They would not need a firm permit for that location.
I think you're basically talking about a branch.
Yeah.
You know, like one entity might have multiple offices, and I make sure that Ben understands that. So right now, if a firm has 3 offices, you get 3 firm permits for each location. And if what you're asking is if one of those locations provides a test work but the other 2 don't.
Right. Do we have to get 1 permit, or do we still have to get 3 permits?
In the scenario that Ms. Garvin is putting forth, I think they would only need to get the 1. Now, I don't know how common that would be that a particular one company with numerous branches would have exclusive, limited services at one versus another.
If they're going to hold their name out to be ATA certified public accountants, I mean, we do have an office that doesn't provide a test work out of that office.
But it does utilize certified public
But
accountants in the title.
they're under our name as a certified public accounting firm. I mean, I would think that office should have a permit.
But yeah, I mean, they would.
Any CPA firm that expands to creates another office, whether that office does the test work or not, to me, still has to have a permit in that specific location that new location.
If the title of the company does include CPAs, PAs, certified public accountants, accounting, or accountant, then yes, it would still need a firm permit.
If you let's say, Stephen, you were ATA and you did not have CPAs in your title, in the title of your practice. I think that would be,
That would be where the location which does not have, if the company as a whole doesn't utilize prohibited language in its name, and Branch A offers a test and Branch B does not, Branch A would need a firm permit and Branch B would not.
Even if I'm registered as a CPA firm,
The
my firm as a whole, I just call it ATA, but I'm registered as a CPA firm. So the public can go look at my license and, and see that I am a CPA firm. I don't advertise such. You're saying if I have a new office, that if I put a new office in, pick a town, then if it doesn't do a test work, I don't have to have a license for that office?
That's correct.
and if you don't use the title CPAs or certified.
I'm registered, though, as a CPA firm.
The location providing a test services is. Every location that offers to perform or performs a test work needs to be registered as a firm permit, with a firm permit. And any location of any company that utilizes prohibited language would need that as well.
I think that this is a change, so I want to make sure everybody understands, and please help me if I'm wrong here, Ben, but the way it read before was establishment of a new office or location providing accounting services. Accounting services is defined as the full scope of services. Attest, tax, management advisory, consulting services, which is why now everybody basically would have to have a firm permit. If this change were to be approved, then it's been engaged in the practice of public accountancy, which is defined as a test work or using a CPA designation. So this is a change.
What if that office that doesn't do a test work, that's an office of a CPA firm that doesn't advertise their name as a CPA, because there's a lot that don't. They call them, whatever. But they're an office full of CPAs. There's, people in there holding themselves out to be CPAs, not doing a test work. To me, that would seem like you would have to have a permit for that office. Because to the public, you're holding yourself out to be a group of CPAs. Just because it just seems like we're getting into some weird technicalities here.
I'm going to hopefully have the attorneys respond. This is the conversation that we have had for the past several weeks on what the law and rules actually allow us to do.
I think if you're a CPA firm, regardless, and you have a new office, it needs to be a registered office, even if you don't do a test work in there. And maybe I'm just ignorant on the rules, but
I agree it could be a little confusing if one office of your firm is registered and another is not, but you're both using the same name. Because the public is going to assume that you're both doing the same thing.
Can I just make, I may be stepping over Ben, but in the same rule, it's not listed here. Number 1 says the following A through H things have to be notified, but 1 actually says concerning the practice of public accountancy. So I'm assuming the change is to make it consistent, because we're talking about A through H has to concern the practice of public accountancy, but then H actually says, or G says accounting services, which is broader than public accountancy. Is that right?
Yes.
So it's basically I read it as basically a consistency thing, but I could be wrong, but that's how I read the change.
That's what we're striving for. And this, it does relate back to the memorandum, the first part, leaving titles and designations alone off the side, is that the statute says that there's nothing in the statute which will prohibit anyone from offering or performing anything utilizing accounting skills, management advisory, and that the realm for this that's protected and exclusive to licensed and registered firms, licensees and registered firms, is a test. And so what we're trying to do with this rule is say,
I think we're changing, this is changing the intentions of this rule. I think we're saying, as part of public accounting, if you gotta have if you're providing accounting services, because that supports the position we've always taken, that accounting and accounting services is a prohibited thing for a non-certified firm to hold yourself out to that. This is taking that away and just saying back, and it's moving it to a test. I think the intention originally of the rule, my opinion would have been, was that it includes all of those services, tax, attest, management advisory services, et cetera.
I understand.
Now we're taking that away.
Well, I
We're
wouldn't
changing the rule.
I wouldn't. We are.
We're changing we're changing the meaning of the rule, or or what the rule's saying you can and can't do. We're just stripping away tax and all that. And my position is that we do have authority over those things as based on our interpretation of the statute.
I think it's, well, over the last couple of weeks, I guess one of the issues that came up was, I think you all probably have the authority to discipline a CPA who is doing work that's not necessarily a test work, right? For happens, I think we have complaints over tax issues that come up that may not be a test work or whatnot, and we've said, well, I think you can breach your standard of care I think that you would still probably have authority over anyone who is who's licensed by the board for any of the work that they do. Kind of wondering, even if a branch, if a CPA branch, so a branch of a firm that doesn't have CPA in the name was registered, if somebody made a complaint and said, this person in here who works for that firm did bookkeeping services, only bookkeeping services, not to the standard of care, would you all feel inclined to want to look and see if that person, that individual who may not be licensed by the board, would be disciplined from you? I'm not sure as to what the registration does on an office or branch that's not, that's not performing any type of a test work or whatnot.
Register any office at all. I mean, to me, it's consistency.
Well, I think you have to do the initial the initial registration was required by the statute, so that we tell people all the time, or licensees, is that once you get a license from us, you were absolutely saying, we will let you know where we're at. You can come in and do inspections and do investigations any given time. And that's what, that's the burden that they take for doing that, because we have to know where our licensees are at. Absolutely have to know where they're at.
So why not just register the firm as a whole and not require the individual offices to have it? I mean, to me that solves the problem as well. If I'm a firm, if I'm whatever firm I am, I commit to follow the rules and the statutes and the laws as a firm. That's my permit. Then I don't have to have one for each individual office that I open up, because those offices, by definition, are going to operate as they're part of the firm.
I think that we would want to, I think that it would make, I want to say the word policy, but it's really good that if any branch of the firm who actually has a physical location, is doing a test work, holding themselves out as a CPA, we need those to be registered so that we know where they're at, so that we can come to them if we have an issue. Because what we wouldn't want is a complaint to arise alleging that a firm is doing some, X, Y, and Z work, and we have them on our official database registered in Johnson City, and lo and behold, we didn't realize they had a branch in Memphis. And so we weren't really sure where they were doing that work at or whatnot. And I think the reason why we made this amendment is we were trying to clean up the rules as we were asked to do, and we found that there was a slight discrepancy, kind of as Mr. Roberts pointed out earlier, in G, from the rest of that whole section of rules. So this is a good discussion that we have here.
All or none, because I mean, using your reasoning, to me, I would want to have addresses for all the offices that firm has to make sure that they're not, in fact, doing a test work if they say they aren't. I mean, what's the harm? If the firm as a whole, and you have to notify of additional offices, or you have to have a permit for every single office.
What
It's
happens
not consistent.
when I'm in Johnson City and my Memphis office calls and says, hey, I've got somebody here who needs a financial statement, can you meet with them? So I go down to Memphis and meet with them in the office that doesn't do a test work. Maybe the work is performed out of the other office, but it's still part of it's being conducted in that office.
Absolutely. I think in that scenario, they would need to be.
And so how do we police that if we don't have them registered? And it's, I'm with you, saying if they're doing it register, you need to know where they are.
Right, that I do recognize that there would be a difficulty in the enforcement of that rule. It would have to be an all or nothing. There could not be middle ground. In reading this and looking at this, I couldn't anticipate, and I don't know because I'm not in the industry, that there would be many branch locations that would not be registered. I think that this rule would allow, in the rare instance where a branch could say, we don't do any attest work and we don't use the name CPA firm, that we don't need to be registered.
Well, there's a lot of firms that have offices that don't do attest work, as locations that don't do attest work.
They also probably use the name certified public accountant in their firm name, so which brings them into it. I mean, I guess I'm having a hard time seeing what the real problem is with this change. You know, I think you can wind up with almost every office of every firm registered. You know, when you say engaged in the practice of public accountancy, I think as a practitioner out there, I'm going to go ahead and register. I don't know what it costs to register an office, but it's not huge, I don't think. And I just don't see.
Do any attest work. Technically, they wouldn't have to register as a firm. Well, let's forget Dallas, use Nashville. It's in Tennessee. Technically, under this, they wouldn't have to.
Doesn't say that
It's in the
that
practice.
test work.
That they're in the practice of public accounting, so they would technically have to register that office. Don't identify. So therefore, if they had an office that didn't have to maintain, that didn't do attest work, they wouldn't have to register as a firm based on our rules. I'm sure they would too, but they don't have to.
Chairman Bluffus, can you pull your microphone down, please? Thank you.
And I think the original rule that we're looking at, I'll tell you where it came from in the statute. I mean, the original rule said each new office or location providing accounting services. Right, so that's basically how the rule was, and it's coming from the statute that says, within it's a paragraph, but the sentence that we saw is it plainly states, a firm with multiple locations shall obtain a permit for each location. And then it says, a firm must hold a permit issued under this section in order to provide attest services or to use the title CPA, CPA firm, PAs, or PA firm. So from that statute, the original rule added providing accounting services. That was added in the rule that we're amending here. So in looking at that and going back to the statute, we were trying to figure out what, in keeping in mind the rest of the section where it really didn't have accounting services, it had engaged basically the practice of public accountancy. So we were wondering if, I mean, when we looked at it, we thought, I think that the intention really was that it was when you were providing attest services that there's the ability that a firm could not use the title CPA, it could be a branch location not doing attest services, not need to be registered, because we probably wouldn't even, where would the complaint come from if they're not doing attest work? If they're just, for instance, my general knowledge, what if they're just doing bookkeeping services, they don't have their CPAs going down there doing audits, attest work reviews, or anything like that, why would we really need to feel the need to regulate them if the people doing the work aren't CPAs or PAs and whatnot, and people from the licensed branch aren't coming down and do a test work. So that's kind of where we got to when we were reading that. So we said, oh, okay, well, if that's the idea, and let's just shore it up with and change the rule to make it a little bit clearer based on what the statute says there.
Our interpretation of the statute is it does include work in addition to a test work. We govern all the work that we talked about under accounting services,
Right. But
right? What am I missing here?
Well, you wouldn't govern someone just doing bookkeeping services who's not a licensee or holding themselves out to be a licensee, just bookkeeping services.
saying public accounting, and it doesn't change the meaning of the services. We're just saying that basically our members or people that are providing public accounting services.
Basically, the way that the rule was originally written, you basically said if your company is a CPA firm, we are going to regulate every aspect of what you do, regardless as whether or not it's a test work or not. Everything. That you will tell us every office that you have open, you will register it, whether you have CPAs there or not, whether you're doing a test work. So that's that's kind of the broad scope that it was at. In reading it with the rest of with the statute and the rest of the rules, we thought, well, was it intended to be that broad? Is that actually what it was, or can they actually scope it down so that we're only needing those other locations to be registered if they're actually either using the name CPA or actually doing a test work? Or
That's fine, as long as you don't think we are watering down our position based on our interpretation of the statute. I'll be quiet about this. That was just my
I
concern.
would say they're even strengthening it,
That's fine.
would be my interpretation.
I guess this would not take away anything if anyone did any type of, if you had a licensee doing a test work or doing any kind of accounting service at that location that wasn't registered, then they'd have a huge issue. One, they'd have to get registered. Two, we'd have purview over the actions that they actually did, right?
But wouldn't that only be if they were providing a test services
If
or they use the title CPA?
a licensee, whether at a registered firm or not, performing any sort of
Oh, yes.
services
Okay,
falls
understand.
underneath the jurisdiction of the board to discipline them for lack of due professional care or fraud or whatever.
You're just not disciplining the firm, maybe you would be disciplining the individual.
That's correct.
Okay, Stephen? Okay, let's move on.
Well, did you say you wanted to get these approved by category or?
Unless they're you want to go ahead until we come up with an objection?
Want to do what you want to do.
No, hey, I'm flexible.
Okay, the next one is, this was a discussion that the board had at the last meeting with regard to dual credit, and I believe the board asked us to take a stab at crafting a rule to address the potential dual credit issue, and that's what this is. And so it reads, it's within the definition of what a semester hour is, and we say semester hours received from a class for which dual credit is given may only be applied once towards an applicant's required semester hours. And so, questions on that? The next rule is the board asked for a rule change back, I believe, in October of 2014 with regard to, I guess it's internship credit hours or externship credit hours, one of the intern. And the board had asked for that to be increased to 6 semester hours and 8 quarter hours. And that's what this rule, that implementation was never made. So that's what this is. Okay. Now we're moving down into the rules of professional conduct. Here we have just a general overview. We found there were 3 defined terms within the rules, but then we found instances in which people kind of mixed them up. And so they were utilizing things, creating new terms which actually weren't defined anywhere. And so that's part of what we're trying to do is clean some of this stuff up. And so here we're striking the public from it. And the reason being is that we have a defined term of accounting services, which includes everything. And so we felt like this would clarify this, as opposed to, because public accounting services could be interpreted as being different than accounting services, and accounting service encompasses it all. No questions on that? Okay. Moving down to the disciplinary action and civil penalties chapter. Here we are looking to repeal Rule 0020-04.04, and what that was putting an obligation on the licensee to return their wall certificate. And I believe we discussed this at the last board meeting. And so that's just a change in the table of contents, as well as repealing that particular rule. Let's see. Okay. Rule 0020-05-.03. This particular section is on continuing education, and this is what we believe to be is where the inactive status was created. And this this rule is to clarify this particular section. And it's not going to be in your brown books, because I think this is it was enacted after 2012. So what we're trying to do here is clarify what exactly an inactive licensee can and cannot do, and that's in the next, this is in 3C and 3D, all on these last three particular rule changes. The reason for some of these changes is that from our reading of the rule and interpretation, it would seem to disadvantage an inactive licensee by precluding them from performing services any member of the public can perform.
Addresses your earlier comments about what a person might be able to do during tax season in the back office of a firm.
What does it say? I've read it, but
I'm sorry?
I've read it, but I need to think about it here. But what does it really say?
The original rule?
Well, the amended rule, what are we doing?
Okay, the amended rule is what it's saying is that, in essence, that those who have applied and received inactive status cannot perform the practice of public accountancy, i.e., utilizing any of the designation without the qualifying inactive language next to it, or providing a test services.
Situation I mentioned, we're saying now a CPA who wants to go back and work busy season, as long as they work in the back room and don't use the CPA designation, don't sign any return, literally sit there and do the work and then shove it back out under the door, that's okay?
And to clarify, when you say CPA, do you mean an inactive licensee?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, I'm saying, my understanding is you can't be inactive and do that
So-
under our previous interpretation.
Well, right, yeah, and that's the thing is we took a stab at this, and really we would like to know what the board would like for its inactive licensees. And so what we were thinking is that the statute says that the statute does not prohibit anyone from offering accounting services, tax services, and things like that. But the rule says, hey, if you go inactive, you can't do any of that stuff.
I think we need to change that.
That's correct, sir, and that's what we're attempting with these particular changes in this rule.
If you're inactive, you should be treated just like you never were active. And so you can do the services, and you're not claiming to be qualified or certified or CPE.
Don't sign returns.
Yeah. Why
you
would we treat them any differently than a person who never was certified at all?
That's correct. Well,
Yeah.
right, and exactly, because you're going to end up having to have a active licensee from a registered firm sign off on that work, much the same as like a paralegal would do work for myself or Mr. Glandorf, and then we end up signing off on. That the rule states that you can, and there were some confusions within this particular rule. I mean, there's some areas where, let me actually pull it out.
The concern you have there is, and that's why you have to be really careful, the concern you would have is that people who knew that Casey worked for 50 years in public accounting, he goes inactive, those who haven't kept up with him lately might still think he's keeping his license current and he's keeping his CPA current, and they wouldn't know that he's inactive. So that's why this rule would be needed to be in place.
Yes, absolutely. And the rule, let me just, okay, so the rule without the change prohibits them from offering to the public any one of these services, including accounting skills, auditing skills, issuance of reports, financial statements, management advisory, financial advisory, consulting services, preparation of tax returns, or furnishing advice on tax matters. And so that really just cuts out basically anything this person can do with what they've done for their entire career. Whereas a member from the public can go and get a job at H&R Block and do tax preparation scot-free. And so this rule is to retool it to really say, okay, you want to go inactive? Fine. You cannot do a test work. You cannot use your designation unless you put this particular modifier of inactive on there.
I have a problem with them having the ability to be able to put CPA, parentheses, and active.
That's a current rule.
Can do that.
Yes, sir.
I know, but based on this, that kind of gives me a little heartburn about being able to do that, because if I've had let's say I've been in practice for, 40 years or whatever, and everybody knows that I'm a CPA and I've been doing it for that, and all of a sudden I say, I'm not doing any test work now, I'm gonna have to have all the regulation from this board, I'm just gonna change the name from ATA CPAs just to ATA, I'm gonna surrender my, go inactive. All my business cards will say CPA, parentheses, inactive. When someone asks, say, I got tired of paying the tax and all that mess. Still the same guy. It's not like I'm dumber because I surrendered my license. And now I've got an unequal playing field against some competitors. They're having to follow the board standards, get CPE and all that stuff.
Right,
It's made my life real easy.
right, and that's a different. There's two issues here, right? So one is that currently, if you go inactive, you can't do anything. You could close out your license, though, and you could do all these things again with the exception of a test work. And so I think the rule as it is puts inactive licensees in a disadvantageous position to just the general public. And then with what you're...
Say that again a little bit louder.
Yes, sir. Well, there's a scenario that Tony and I discussed in that at a firm, you could have someone who's never been licensed, and you could have someone whose CPA's gone inactive. The CPA inactive cannot do anything that this non-licensee can do. And that, what we're saying, is what we're trying to amend and fix.
Did that make sense?
I agree
you could
with
have-
that. All
okay.
I'm saying is the ability to put CPA, parentheses, and active on your card gives them a new advantage here now, because we're letting them do anything they want to. To the public, the public's going to see it, and they're going to say, man, that guy's a CPA. What's the inactive? I got tired of paying the tax.
You couldn't do a test work, and any work that this inactive individual does still would fall underneath the jurisdiction of the board to discipline them. So if they did do tax preparation and it fell short of the due professional care, they're still subject to the discipline of the board. One of the rules that's not actually on the rule change, because we're not changing it, it's A, underneath this 3, says, for purposes of disciplinary action, the board shall retain jurisdiction over all certificate holders whose license is in inactive status.
They still pay privilege tax?
No, sir. But they still have to pay renewal fees,
Correct.
and they do not have to do CPE.
Unless they're over the age of
65. And they request, you don't automatically, once you hit 65, you have to request.
I guess my point is, and I'll be quiet because I feel like I'm being a pain today, and I'm not trying to be. I just want to make sure I understand this and we're accurate. But to me, if somebody has the word, the term CPA on their card, whether it says active, inactive, or whatever you want to call it, there should be some consistency there. I just don't think someone that should have a full, they can do whatever they want to, and then they can go and act, they got a firm, they're just doing, and forget the test work, they're just doing tax and accounting. So I surrender my license now, I don't have to get CPE and I don't have to pay the tax. That's a pretty big deal.
You actually don't surrender your license. You still have it. It's just inactive.
And I still have it on my wall, and I can call it, but I'm in active status.
We have another status as
Why would I
well, which
wanna
is
keep it?
retired, and that same individual who goes into retired status has to put retired next to their name.
To be inactive, how old is? There's no age requirement. There's no experience. I mean,
No, sir.
I could start up out of college, pass my CPA exam, and then boom, decide I'm just going to be a tax and auditing or tax and accounting person. No attest. I got the certificate on the wall, which I can continue to keep up there, and I just changed my business cards. They look exactly the same, except for I just have inactive beside it. Now I can do anything I want to, with the exception of a test work, don't have to get CPE, don't have to pay the tax.
You also could not be a 51% owner of a CPA firm.
That's fine. I'm not holding myself to CPA. I'm a sole proprietor.
Right, I just want to make,
I'm Stevens Accounting Firm. Or I'm sorry, yeah,
No,
Stevens
you couldn't use the accounting
Bookkeeping and
terminology.
tax firm. What do you call it? And I can do what I want to, and I can have that certificate on the wall. The public thinks I'm an active CPA because that thing's sitting on the wall.
Well, if you were to use it, CPA anywhere, website, business card, letterhead, it has to have inactive next to it. And if you do not have inactive next to it, there will be a complaint that I will be presenting about this particular person to the board.
My certificate on the wall is not going to say inactive.
Right.
I'll just say, come into my office, I'll show you what I am. I'm not.
Let me put it into a little bit different context, where I see the individuals that have been in public accounting and have particularly gone into the corporate environment, and you read a proxy of a public company, either the directors or the officers, the individuals that may have been a CPA before either don't use the title at all or say certified public accountant inactive. And to the reader of that proxy, it's very clear that they're not a practicing public accountant. I don't see that they have any advantage whatsoever.
I'm talking about those folks. I don't look at that. When I read the proxy, for example, I don't look at them as any different. I don't think, I just think, well, he just got tired of fooling with all the requirements and decided to turn it off. I'm talking about the people that are engaged in the
So
practice.
what are you proposing?
All I'm saying is I agree with the intention. I understand that we're allowing them to do the work. I don't want to try to tell them that they can't. I'm just saying if you want that, you can't. I have a problem using CPA comma inactive or parentheses inactive. That's just my personal opinion.
Well, but it's part of our law. Are you suggesting we change that?
That's what I think we should look at. I agree with this change. I just don't.
Let's take up your proposal at another time.
When do we do that?
After we get through with this, if you want to put that on the.
It's fine. It's just kind of in conjunction with this.
No, if you would like to amend this, we'll take and vote on this separately.
I agree with.
I don't.
I've used cards like that in my work life when I was inactive and working in industry. Prior to working at a CPA firm, so I've had both of those, and so I guess I don't tend to agree with not being allowed to use the designation CPA parentheses inactive.
Say that again. You're in favor or?
I would be opposed to not
Eliminating
including,
Okay.
inactive. Having had that experience, it seemed to work in my case anyway, fine. And I think it is important to indicate that, that difference.
I think having inactive or retired in parentheses behind your name is a significant qualifier that diminishes your attractiveness in the professional world. I don't see how it gives you any advantage whatsoever.
It gives you a leg up over a non-certified person.
Well, so does anybody that doesn't have a certificate.
I also feel like it's basically lining through a significant portion of your professional experience and or resume, right? So if you did it for 40 years and that's what you did, and then all of a sudden you're inactive, do you just have a 40-year blank on your resume when you're sending your resume out? If you didn't have, I agree with you what I'm saying. It seems to me like it's not only is it a significant discounter of your CPA, but it seems to me unfair for somebody who's gone through that, has all that experience, because it is relevant. And frankly, for the public, if we're trying to protect the public, I would rather have the public use someone who has an inactive or retired license to do their tax return than someone who isn't. I think that's probably better for the public.
As we said yesterday, though, that time off without maintaining CPE greatly diminish the person's ability to have a license. I mean, we questioned that the other day, and so that's why we added the 80-hour requirement, because we were concerned a person who had not been maintaining the CPE was not a I can't remember exactly the terminology we used, but it was a negative, because they were outdated, and so we put those teeth in there. If this were holding somebody up to allow, I mean, if we're allowing someone to keep their certificate on their wall, for example, and they're not having to get CPE, to me, they've got a significant advantage. If somebody's sitting in my office, regardless of what my business card says, I've got that certificate sitting behind me, they're going to feel like, hey, I've got a CPA working on my stuff. And technically, I'm not a CPA anymore. I'm not certified anymore, because I'm not maintaining the adequate CPE to keep me up to speed, nor am I paying the tax.
So what is it you're suggesting, Stephen, that we would not allow them to use the term at all, CPA?
I would say
Inactive
not hold it
otherwise?
up. I mean, you can put it on a resume, for example, and say from 1984 to 2002, I was a certified public accountant. But when I go inactive, to me, I'm not a CPA anymore. I've passed the CPA.
Oh.
That would be my thought. I mean, I'm not.
My resume, it's right here. It says that I was in public accounting for 37 years. And somewhere it says that I'm a certified public accountant. But if I was inactive, when I was inactive, I had inactive on there. I'm missing why somebody that's inactive, I'm just, has an advantage over somebody that's active.
I guess it's my interpretation of what the public would think is they don't differentiate between the two. I mean, they're going to look at it and say, this guy was a CPA regardless. We've got somebody in town that was a CPA for a long time. They surrendered the license because they didn't want to have any more. But you still always think that guy's a CPA.
What about a retired doctor? What about a retired lawyer?
Our doctor's not practicing anymore, so I mean, they're not out there competing in the market. They're retired.
They could be either volunteering in a clinic, or they could actually be doing PA services, for example, at a firm under the supervision of an actively licensed doctor. I mean, I guess my point is that, in fact, there is a difference between someone who has had a career or some part of time being a certified active public accountant and then going inactive, versus someone who's never done that. I mean, there is a level of expertise and technical skill, even if it is someone outdated, that is different than that person. So I don't think we have to bring them down to the same level.
A doctor can't go inactive on their license and then go open up their own clinic and be doing surgery and
right, but
prescribing drugs.
Neither can an inactive
Sure they can.
CPA.
They're doing tax returns.
That's different.
They're
I
doing
think
bookkeeping.
but I don't think those are
They're doing
analogous.
payroll.
Though. Yeah.
Well, then,
Would they not have to be under our current rules, though? If somebody is inactive, I mean, I understand what you're saying. If you don't have to incur the cost of CPE and professional privilege tax, then I could offer my services. If I did that, would I not have to have a firm permit? I mean, if we got the word accountant in my, be
No, this is
Casey Stewart,
Right.
CPA inactive. I've got the term in my.
My understanding is that the way to read the statutory framework here is that this is an exception to using the term CPA. It's an exception. It was created by the board, in my understanding. In certain scenarios, one could be in recognition as your service for a CPA for years on end. If you decide to become inactive and do something else, you may keep the CPA designation so long as you inform the public that you're not practicing, meaning put the word inactive next to it. Because the board could, under its statute, say exactly, no, you cannot use CPA, but this exception says that you can use the designation and there would be no requirement to maintain a firm permit because you're actually not licensed. The inactive status is not a licensed status. They cannot do a test work. They cannot do any kind of audits or reviews or whatnot once they're in that inactive status work. There's another reason why that has nothing to do with the accountancy law, which is it is actually to hold yourself out as a licensed professional to the public is actually a felony. So in a scenario where you would have somebody was CPA inactive and somebody goes in there and says, oh, can you do this review for me? Oh, I was, and they kind of give this indication that they are actually licensed and have the education to do that, and they don't because they're inactive, that would actually be a felony. And our department does from time to time refer things over to district attorneys to prosecute where consumers have been harmed by somebody who's holding themselves out. And sometimes, not necessarily in this board, sometimes they were previously licensed, their license has lapsed, and they thought, well, I did it for so long, no big deal.
Yeah, and that's why I said non-attest work, just to differentiate between the two. I mean, I agree, they can't do attest work. I'm just saying that bookkeeping, tax, management, advisory services, all the non-attest work services that our members do as well.
Stephen, back to the item that's on the agenda right now. Are you?
This wouldn't be the one that would address that. This just relates to it.
You're okay?
I'm fine with this language,
and
but
proceeding, okay.
if I want to open up another can of worms, and I guess that's.
Okay.
So I think the two rule changes on the bottom of page 4 and the remnants of that one on the top of page 5 and then D on page 5 are all within the same section with regard to inactive status. So I'm not sure if we have read or addressed all of them individually, but they're kind of all together. But I know that we've started with number 3. Are there any questions on number 3? Okay. C, at the bottom of page 4, is again, we're just trying to clean up some of the language by utilizing the defined terms from Chapter 1 so that there's consistency across the board.
Let me raise a question.
Yes, sir.
In that regard, you list a number of types of services. Can an inactive CPA perform litigation support?
I mean, when, if I understand your question correctly, is when you, for, like in a divorce proceeding, if someone needs to look at the accounting of the different individuals or
or
whatever.
A lawsuit of some sort.
It's an excellent question.
It is a good question. Maybe because you said litigation support, that maybe does not give me enough information as to determine what they would actually be doing.
Like a forensic accountant?
Probably that would be a good description of it. No report is going to be prepared. You're helping the attorney understand some of the accounting terminology. And this is from firsthand experience of assisting the attorney to understand the accounting issues that are under debate.
That is a good question.
Wouldn't it be whether you're doing, as long as you're not going to be an expert witness, relying on your credentials, and all you're doing is back office support work, I don't.
But the problem is it starts out as being litigation support, and then it goes to into trial. And wouldn't it be logical that that individual be called to be an expert witness, even though that was not the understanding at the outset? And even though that you might not, and in questioning, demonstrating your credentials, that you were a CPA. I mean, the question is, I think it's, you're being hired because of your past experience and not necessarily your current position.
They disclose that they're CPA inactive status while they're on the stand, and to me, that according to our rules, that's compliant. Of course, if I'm an attorney, I wouldn't hire that person for risk that they would shoot a hole through them, that they're not maintaining it, maintaining CPE, so they're not really as qualified as they used to be.
I think that if somebody would be subpoenaed, I don't think that they should be at fault because they were subpoenaed, because at that point in time, they would be obligated to ask any questions regarding their knowledge or whatnot. But, I mean, prior to that support, that litigation support, my real question is he being paid to give some kind of expert advice that this attorney is going to use for their client regarding current financials, and is the client going to do anything with that? I mean, is there something else to be done with it?
I don't want to.
That's a very
Let me
good question.
just give you firsthand experience with it, in that I was asked to provide litigation support. I told the attorney, I'm not an active CPA, I'm inactive. Fine with me. I'm really wanting your general business knowledge. And at least at some point in the rules, it said it included expert or litigation support. My daughter was doing CPE on December 27th and 28th in order to get it done. She said, "Dad, what are you doing?" And I said, "I'm litigation support." And she said, "It's against the rules." And at that time, it was against the rule. And that's how I became active again. At some point, the interpretation by management said that litigation support, you had to have an active certificate, and I just don't see that in here.
Oh, right, and that's kind of some of the original questions we had in discussions is, what is the scope of the licensure requirement, right? Is what is this litigation support? Because we went back to, if you're not providing a test work, audit reviews, things of that nature, then you should not have to be licensed. That's really what I'm getting to, is that I understand there's some kind of a creep of the scope of what they want you to do, and I know how attorneys can be. They sign you up to, do something small, and then they want to, broaden it out or whatnot.
I agree with what you've done here.
And just one of the cases which we did close in this particular legal report did involve a forensic firm. And the investigator's investigation uncovered that the actual reports that were issued were not, by definition, a test work. And then Ms. Garvin also pointed out that we do have a rule on the books, is that license holders engaged to testify in a Tennessee court as expert witnesses in the areas such shall have completed within the current or most recent period at least 20 hours in the subject areas as noted in this paragraph containing.
That's under the CPE rules, though, for active CPAs. The way I read this change here, I think it makes clear that you could do the litigation support,
agree
as
with
long
that.
as you're not giving
Testifying.
an opinion on financial statements, doing some kind of a test work.
Right.
I agree
Okay.
with you, but that was.
And that's why I think this is a good change. I think.
Right. I agree with this.
Can I point out, in letter C, the last section, or any consulting engagement which would constitute the attest function. I just conferred with Don, and he's having trouble coming up with a consulting whether that's appropriate. Maybe we just need to strike that part of it. A consulting engagement which would constitute the attest function. There isn't anything
Right.
under standards that would allow for that.
I would agree that should be. I don't know how a consulting engagement could end up being in a test function.
Okay, so is it the board's motion then to strike all the language after the parenthetical? So we're going to strike or any, and that was an existing rule. I didn't add that in there. Just so you know, I didn't add that in there. Okay. Or any consulting engagement which would constitute the attest function.
Is there a motion to make that change?
So moved.
Second.
Further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And we only voted on that one item, and so we're going to proceed to D.
D, still within the inactive licensee realm, we are, again, just trying to clean up these particular rules so that they're easily digestible by a licensee and board staff and the attorneys as well. So this is then stating what the particular individual can do, so long as, let's see, it's just saying what they can do. Says that they can engage in the practice of public accountancy so long as, one, the services are provided without compensation to the certificate holder. I'm that was an existing rule. I'm guessing that's some sort of a pro bono type attest work. Does that occur? Yeah? Yes. Okay. 2, the services are performed solely for the certificate holder's employer, and such employer is not a licensed accounting firm. I'm guessing that would be like an internal audit. Is that right? Or I'm so unfamiliar with the industry that I have to ask questions. And then 3 was I added without placing the word inactive adjacent to their CPA or PA designation. The reason for this is that this particular number 3 contradicts a rule above it. 3B says certificate holders who are granted inactive status by the board shall be required to place the word inactive adjacent to their CPA or PA designation when using such designation for any lawful purpose, including but not limited to such designation of any business card, letterhead, resume, or biography, which I thought was this other rule here in D kind of says that you can't use it. So I think it's confusing, and we're creating a very windy path for a inactive licensee to understand when they can and cannot use the CPA inactive designation. And so I just added that piece on there just to clarify that they can use it so long as the designation is there. So are there any questions on D?
D,
Does anyone have questions?
tell me
Stuart
in
does.
layman's terms what it's saying.
For D?
Yeah.
It's just saying this inactive licensee can perform a test work if they're not charging it. Now, granted that they would still have to do that from a licensed and registered firm, but they could not charge for that. So I'm guessing there's pro bono associated. Perhaps somebody wanted to do a test work for the church, or I don't know. 2. The services are performed solely for the certificate holder's employer. I'm guessing that would be someone who's working for Nissan and they're doing an internal audit, so it's not really they're doing public accountancy, they're just doing an audit for Nissan. And then 3 is just stating that they can utilize the designation so long as the word inactive is on there and they're using it in a lawful manner.
I'm really uncomfortable with this section, simply because it says a certificate holder who has been granted inactive status may engage in practice of public accountancy, which is defined as performing a test work or using the CPA designation, and you just can't perform a test work. I mean, first of all, in a test engagement, is it not issued by the firm who is therefore owned by a 51% CPAs? The engagement department is an active CPA. I just don't see where you would be an inactive CPA being allowed to perform a test work. I'm just having I think this is very confusing, and if we are, if we need to, my first thought is we just need to get rid of this, but I'm not clear on what we're missing, if there's a piece we're missing if we get rid of this. And maybe the attorneys can help me with that rationale, but I'm just uncomfortable. It does not make sense to me to be able to apply. So I need some help. And
Are these all inclusive tests that are designed in this, or just a either or?
either or is the way it's written.
And did you hear the
I'm
question?
sorry, I was getting briefed on the next stage of this, but is this the D, the problem with the D?
Yes.
And which one did you not like?
Okay, so, well, actually, I don't like any of it because I don't.
Okay, Ben, you've lost.
Tell us how you really feel.
So it basically says that if you've been granted inactive status, you may engage in the practice of public accountancy, and practice of public accountancy is defined as a test work or using the CPA designation, so long as you do the following things. Well, an inactive CPA is not permitted to perform a test work. So I can't think of a situation where an inactive CPA could perform a test work. Even, let's say you take a big firm, as Mr. Eldridge talked about earlier, you send some non-licensed or inactive CPAs out to do the field work. The attest engagement is never signed by those individuals. It's signed by the firm. There's an engagement partner who is an active CPA. I just can't find or want to even give anyone the feeling that they could perform a test work or public accountancy, which is defined that way, as an inactive CPA. So initially I'm thinking we just need to get rid of this. It's confusing, but there may be something we're missing, and I don't want to mess that up either.
What about a point of clarification added to it that says not intended to prohibit an inactive person from working on an test engagement, so that we've covered both of it. You can't sign it, you can't do a test work, but that doesn't mean if you're either retired or inactive that you can't still draw a paycheck from a firm. That's why I was asking about the compensation issue and whether these were either ors or all inclusive.
And I think you're right, and I think part of why we may not need it in the form that it was in is because we've just decided in the previous section that an inactive CPA could do tax work, let's say, as long as they indicate that they're CPA inactive, which was not the way it was written before, so you needed this clarification. And look at what Ben changed, a very important point when he said, you may be granted inactive status. A certificate holder who has been granted inactive status may perform the services set forth in C above. That was when those services included everything: management, advisory, tax, consulting services, and we've just changed that.
This is as the Brits would say, a sticky wicket of a rule. So we had a very difficult time navigating this thing because as it is written, that means that an inactive licensee can only perform tax, non-attest work. Let's just simplify it. Non-attest work for free, or for their employer for internal stuff, or obviously putting inactive next to it. And so if it was up to us, we would have you tell us to strike the whole thing and rewrite it so that it's clear. And not just D, but 3 above. And that's kind of where I was saying before, is that this is a very confusing rule as written for me, for any of us legals sitting here trying to understand it.
But it's your recommendation that this be rewritten?
I mean, we can do that if that's what you would like, or if you like these changes, we can do that as well. I think, I mean, and this is the problem. I'm not a CPA, so I don't know how the industry operates, and that's kind of when I was asking questions like, so do firms or CPAs offer pro bono attest work for nonprofit organizations or similar?
Yes, too much of it.
They could, but they would still have to do it out of a licensed firm,
Yes,
correct?
right. It has to be a licensed firm.
And this addresses Mr. Stewart's concern, is that, or Mr. Eldridge, I can't remember which one, whereas an active person could be working on this audit without being subject to discipline as violating the rules, so long as an active licensee ends up signing off on it. And so I think that's what's kind of covered in here. Again, it is confusing, and we would like, I'm sure that the board would like to, have their licensees know what they can and cannot do.
I tend to agree with Wendy's reading of it, and it seems to me like we could fix it by just changing D completely to say that a person who's been granted inactive can provide accounting services provided the following things. Because it seems to me like the way what we were talking about in C before was the whole global accounting services. So now we've changed that and fixed it, so D doesn't really matter unless you want to say that, oh, by the way, if you're preparing a tax return and signing it and you're going to use CPA, you have to use inactive or whatever next to it. So it seems to me like we fix it by just either deleting D to get all together, or saying if you're going to do something in accounting services, you have to identify yourself as inactive, or one of the other two things. That's my read, but I could be mistaken because you drafted it.
I think we're following the same thought pattern.
Was that, Gabe, a motion on your part?
Sure. So I guess, well, there's two questions for the board. I guess we could either delete D altogether, and I'm assuming that means legally, since C outlines that you can't do attest services, right? That means other non-attest services are okay, even if the rule doesn't explicitly say that. Or we could clarify and explicitly say in D that you can do non-attest services so long as you provide your inactive designation next to your inactive status next to your designation. So I think those are the two alternatives. Do you have an opinion as to what we should do?
Mr. Glandorf's reluctance to provide opinions on things.
Yeah.
Why not the board make a motion for legal to redraft D in accordance with what the board is stating right here? And that way, at the next meeting, we can come with a better version for the board to analyze and vote on.
So should we, to be clear, should we make the motion to delete D in its entirety for this amendment process and then ask you to go and redraft D?
We can just redraft it and not vote on D at all. D
Okay.
does not, we can do these all piecemeal. So if there's only one rule, for example, that you all agree that should be changed, we could push that forward, and the other ones we can rework on.
There might be some concern though where we voted on the previous, I don't want these to go into effect at different times.
Right, and that's what I'm thinking. So it seems to me like a safe route would be to
Rewrite all of the inactive status rule.
or go A through C, we approve and we delete D in its entirety, and then come back at a separate time and add the D if we need to do it.
I like that idea.
Yeah, let me just, I guess, ask a question here in D, and it goes back to why this may have been in there in the first place, but it seems like with D1, we're trying to give inactive certificate holders the ability to issue reports on financial statements if they don't take any compensation for it. And I would think that would be with regard to churches or the local boys club or some little nonprofit that doesn't have the money to pay anybody to do that, but they need some kind of audit. And I think you need that in the rules somewhere. And if we take D out, strike it completely,
Let me see if I understand. So you think that an inactive CPA should be able to provide an audit pro bono for the church down the street, which would then not out of a firm and it not be subject to peer review, as long as it's free of charge?
As an
Have an
inactive,
opinion on it, or that would say CPA inactive?
What?
Would the opinion say?
well, yeah, you'd have to say CPA inactive.
But that
on
means
there.
that he may not have had any CPE for the last 12 years.
It's
may not
more
be.
of a form of a question.
Yeah.
Why was it in there to start with?
That's a good, very
Yeah.
good.
Somebody before us had a reason for having it in there, and to me, that's what it's doing, is giving inactive CPAs the ability to do that if they don't take any compensation for it.
I think originally this section was there to allow individual inactive CPAs to be able to do tax returns for friends and family. That's really why I used this rule previously. But now we're totally changing it to the practice of public accountancy, which is a test. I think it's a whole different topic of conversation when you change what types of services you can provide without compensation. Tax work was not, there weren't the restrictions there are that there are on a test work.
And
Yeah, my comment's more of a question. I agree with redrafting the thing. Let's be sure we don't leave something out when we do that we're not overlooking.
Let me suggest that we go ahead with 5, with the understanding that when we make the overall motion, that we approve all the recommendations with the exception of D, which is going to be rewritten.
And D is now also a sub-part of that number 3 on the preceding page. So it's 3, C, and D, they're all together. I would like to let the board know that in this 2012 edition, D was not in there. These are new. I don't know, obviously I've only been here since June, so I don't know when they were enacted, but it has been within the last 3 years. Is that number 3 with regard to
So
inactive
Casey,
status?
you and I were culpable.
And I think it might be difficult to rewrite D in isolation from the rest of number 3 regarding the inactive status, which includes 3 and 3C, which are proposed changes, and I recognize that the board did like those changes. So perhaps we should rewrite all of number 3. And the board would need to give us a little bit of direction, at the very least, maybe through the Law and Rules Committee chairperson, as to what we want to allow inactive licensees to do and what we don't.
Is that agreeable to everybody? That would be Trey Watkins.
So if we do that, then 3A through D in its current form is going to stay in our books, and we know there needs to be changes to it. And I guess the question is the board comfortable understanding that we have to make changes to it, leaving it as it is for at least another 9 months, 3 months till the next meeting, and 6 months for the rule to change to go into effect? That's the question.
The alternative is that we could push forward, of course, the rules changes that the board has agreed upon. What we would then have, as Mr. Roberts has pointed out, is that rolling window. So let's say, for example, we move forward with these. It could take 6 months to get those in action. So we're talking April of next year at the earliest. But then come January, we have a completely new written rule, which will be falling right behind this particular one, and then that would go into play June or so. So there'd be about 2 months where actually the changes that we have right now could be in effect before they are all changed again.
I think if we're going to go, I'd rather do it all together. I think it makes sense to, because in rewriting one, you may find something that we passed on another one. I would suggest we do them all together.
Other observations?
I feel just the opposite, that I think the changes in 3 and 3C, they are good changes, very necessary. I think we ought to get them enacted as soon as we can.
We could always, we can do both. We can push for the changes that the board wants and also propose a completely written Rule 3 at the next, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
No, I think what he's saying is this, he's comfortable
oh,
with
yeah, yeah. No,
this and this.
Right, and I said the
Oh.
board can vote on that. We can move forward with those rule changes. Simultaneously, we can prepare a completely rewritten entire Rule 3 for the board to consider at the next one, so that it all works together.
Yeah, I'm
But could
fine with
we
that.
delegate to the chair of the Law and Rules Committee the oversight of an approval of D so that it would be all done at one time?
I think my experience with Robert Rules of Order are in their infancy. I don't see why not. And at the very least, we would have a draft for you come January. Yeah.
Or could we have an impromptu, a meeting, but over
Over the
electronic
phone?
communication?
Mhm.
Can that satisfy the
Oh,
Open
yeah.
Meetings Act requirements?
Absolutely.
Maybe with just the Laws and Rules Committee, or?
We could have the
or-
entire board. We can do some phone.
only
meetings
if it's
between now and
necessary.
January.
I would think only if it's necessary.
No, I think that is an option. The problem is that Law and Rules Committee by itself, unless we give, the board delegates its authority to it, really does not have freestanding authority. So we would have to approve either to the committee approving it or to the chair of the committee or having a called meeting. So what's the pleasure of the board?
Are we saying that D would be rewritten? Is that what we're saying now? Okay.
That's the bottom
And
line.
the other would go, the other
In order,
two provisions would
basically,
go
and the
forward.
just are with the understanding of all the concerns that have been expressed here. And the bottom line of which is that what I'm hearing is that there is an incredible lack of enthusiasm for inactive CPAs being able to provide a test services. Is that?
I would clarify my suggestion a while ago. I think I would suggest, is my opinion, is that we hold approving all of 3, but approve everything else.
My only response to that, I don't necessarily disagree, is that we know 3 is poorly written right now, and so that means all the other changes happen, but 3, as we know it's poorly drafted, stays on the books and in effect and won't change for at least 9 months. So the other question I would have is, I'm just wondering if we can actually delegate to a subcommittee of the board, because that wouldn't be a quorum of the board to meet and make action. So I don't know if that's something we could do or not. We may have to have the entire board approve, or at least a quorum of the board approve this.
So the law and rules is Trey Watkins, Chair, Gay Moon, Charlene Spiceland, Janet Booker Davis, and Gabe Roberts.
5 of 11, which isn't a quorum of the board, I would think.
What was wrong with the idea of, to keep them together and keep them on track of just getting it drafted and then calling an electronic meeting for that one specific thing that won't, I mean, any of us can work that time out.
That would certainly fast track it.
I think
And it's
that's a
properly
very good
noticed and
option.
everything, and it's,
Keep in mind, we need to give proper notice for that called meeting.
Can I ask a question on something we've already voted on? Back up in C. I didn't actually vote on that because I was still reading it when we voted, but where we struck through or any consulting engagement which would constitute the test function, I think everyone was in agreement to strike that because consulting is not an attest function. But what about the case where a person is consulting related to an attest function? So you're asked to consult on something that relates to an audit, but you're not doing an audit. Wouldn't it be just as well to leave the sentence in there and say, or any consulting engagement which would relate to the attest function? Because you could be asked to consult on not active.
When you say relate, do you mean result in an attest?
No.
Doesn't have to
The
result in it.
questions that you're consulting with someone on that relate to an audit, for example. And you're giving a consulting opinion, not an opinion in the sense of an audit opinion, but answering questions or consulting on an attest function that relate to an attest function. Don't we want to restrict that? If you strike that sentence, it doesn't restrict that.
So wouldn't that though still need to be further limited to just a test items? So you're in this profession, I'm not, but it seems like if you're consulting on an attest function related to tax liability, for example, you wouldn't have to. I mean, that's certainly not within the purview of the test, right? Because it's tax related.
Well, if you're consulting on the adequacy of an accrual on a tax liability, it would be an attest function.
Not unless they're given a formal opinion letter.
I'm talking about, let's say someone brings to you, you're an active, an attorney asks you to consult on, was this audit done properly? If we don't take that sentence out, you could say, it's okay for me to consult on an audit if I'm not doing an audit.
I think it would be okay to consult on an audit if you're not. I mean, anybody could give an opinion on whether an audit was performed good or not.
But are you qualified if you're inactive?
That depends on the eye of the beholder. I mean, if the attorney in the court thinks I'm qualified, then they're going to listen to my opinion. If not, they're going to trash it and say this guy's not qualified. Do it.
I think that goes to an impeachment of the credibility of the expert witness in the case, which probably takes care of itself, but that's my opinion.
Probably wouldn't hire somebody that's inactive.
I don't feel strongly either way. I'm just saying if we take that sentence out, that sentence did at least keep someone from consulting. Well, it was poorly written because it consulting and consulting engagement is not an attest function. Yeah.
Already gone unless you want to make a new motion. Okay.
I'm just trying to drag the meeting out.
Done a good job.
Make a motion on this? My motion would be that we would accept 3 and 3C, and then we would change the recommendation on 3D to just be deleted in its entirety. And then we would we'd ask legal to make a new draft of D and for us to review at a later time, maybe on a called meeting. I don't know, whatever that would be. And to the extent that in drafting D, they thought there should be other changes in 3, they would present those together on that called meeting or whatever it would be.
Further discussion on Gabe's motion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Very good.
Okay. Last but not least, this last rule, we were clarifying again just by utilizing the defined terms. That's really all that we did here, is that we're changing it from perform practice public accountancy or offer accounting services to the public to engage in the practice of public accountancy. Similar to changes we've made in other sections.
Any questions? Well, let me ask for, entertain a motion to approve these recommendations with the exception of those that we just voted on, which is under continuing education, the 3.
So moved.
Second.
Further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries. Dan, do you have any other matters?
No, Mr. Chairman, I do not. Not at this time.
We need to appreciate the fact that we didn't have a formal hearing today. Or,
There are some elements associated with the rule change that the board will also need to vote on and approve in order for this to move on to the next section. It's going to be a fair amount of reading for me to you guys. We have them right here. So doesn't really much matter what order we go in, but I guess we'll just get started. That's okay. Really what it is, it's the joint government operations questions, the regulatory, the economic impact statement, as well as the Regulatory Flexibility Act statement.
Can I ask a quick question?
Yes,
Is there
sir.
any chance that we could all say we voted, we read them on the record, and then just ask to approve them as a slate, almost like a consent item?
You want me
Instead
to-
of
yeah, I
you
can
having to
just-
read them on the record? Because
I'll
I
have-
think we've all read them. We got them in advance, right?
Well, if you've read, there's one that you have not.
Okay.
This one I will have to read to you, but if you have read the Joint Government Operations Committee statement and the Economic Impact Statement, if there's not any questions or changes that the board would like, then yes, you could certainly make a motion and vote and approve those without me having to read them.
Yep.
Mr. Chairman, I would make a motion that we would accept the answers that have been prepared by the staff to the Joint Operations Committee questions as presented to us.
I'll second that.
further discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
And then a motion for the Economic Impact Statement.
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion that the board approve the economic impact statement as provided by the staff to us.
I'll second that as well.
Discussion? All in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Motion passes.
Thank you, Mr. Roberts. That certainly is going to save my voice and some time. The last thing that we have is the Regulatory Flexibility Act questions and statements that Mr. Glandorf prepared, and I'll have to make sure that I can read it. Number 1, the extent to which the rule may overlap, duplicate, or conflict with other federal, state, and local government rules. The board statement would be, there are no other known overlap, duplication, or conflicts within other existing federal, state, or governmental local rules. Number 2, clarity, conciseness, and lack of ambiguity in the rule. These proposed rules intend in part to not create new rules or requirements, but to redraft to increase clarity, I believe this says concisiveness, and decrease ambiguity in the rules. Number 3, the establishment of flexible compliance and reporting requirements for small businesses. These rules do not establish new compliance or reporting requirements, and as such, there is not a reason for flexible compliance for small businesses. Number 4, the establishment of friendly schedules or deadlines for compliance and reporting requirements for small businesses. These rules do not require a deadline or schedule for compliance or reporting, as there are no new reports. Reports. As such, there is not a reason for flexible compliance for small businesses. Number 5, the consolidation or simplification of compliance or reporting requirements for small businesses. These proposed rules do not establish a new compliance or reporting requirement, and as such, there is no reason for consolidation or simplification. Number 6, the establishment of performance standards for small businesses as opposed to design or operational standards required in the proposed rule. And these proposed rules do not create, design, or operational standards, and as such, there is no reason for the establishment of performance standards. Number 7, the unnecessary creation of entry barriers or other effects that stifle entrepreneurial activity, curb innovation, or increase costs. These rules do not create new entity barriers or other effects that may stifle entrepreneurial activity, curb innovation, or increase costs. And that is it.
Chairman, I make a motion that we accept the statement that Mr. Glover just read.
Second.
Discussion? All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries. Have old business of the performance audit, but haven't we covered that? So, are there any items in new business to come before the?
If you will look on your iPads for the legislative change sitting for the exam, please. This was an item that I did not get you the full packet in advance of this meeting, so if I can give you just a minute or two to read the letter from Dr. Carcello. He is the head of the accounting department at UT.
Tell us how we would go about making this change.
Remind you of our current law. Now, keep in mind, all of the things we just discussed with Ben were rule changes. This is laid out in law, so would require legislative change. The way the law currently reads, which is just after this letter in your materials, the board may admit to the examination prescribed in subsection D any candidate who has completed the educational requirements of this subsection or who will complete the requirements within 200 days immediately following the date of the examination. I did have a conversation with Brad Floyd at the TSCPA about how this particular law came to be. And the way it was described to me is back before the computerized exam, you had certain windows in which you could sit for the exam. And there was a problem with students graduating in a May time period, but they were having to wait all the way until November to sit for the exam. So the 200 days was basically a number that was put in there in order to give candidates the opportunity to prepare and sit for the exam simultaneous with graduation. Well, now we have an online computerized exam, and you can take it more often. So the 200 days almost becomes irrelevant. The discussion before the board today is, would you be interested in supporting a change that would allow candidates to sit for the exam maybe after a bachelor's degree and a certain number of accounting hours? Georgia, from my reading,
Letter says 1 year.
1 year, excuse me, before.
1 year in advance instead of the 200 days.
Okay. I couldn't find that actual wording in their law. To me, it looked like it was after you received your bachelor's degree, but we can certainly attempt to. Oh, okay. They do not need 150 hours to sit for the exam, but they need 150 hours education to be granted their certificate. In the way I read their law, you basically needed a bachelor's degree. They also actually have a residency requirement, which I thought was a bit interesting. Oh, this is updated from what I had seen. Okay, sorry, never mind. I pulled, after his letter in your materials, there is a breakdown I received from NASBA, which gives you an indication of how many states are allowing individuals to sit for the exam with less than 150 hours. And I think we have at least 35 states that allow less than 150 hours to sit in some form or fashion, which, you know, we fall there as well, but we've got the 200 days in there. So is the 200 days still relevant? Would you be interested or supportive of making that more related to the degree they've received and maybe a certain number of accounting hours?
As long as if they've got a bachelor's degree, I don't care when they take it. Just they're not going to be certified until they get the 150
This is
hours.
just step one in getting certified anyway.
Yeah,
so
I'm totally fine. They can do it I'll be honest with you. If they can do it without a bachelor's degree, it really doesn't bother me, because they've got to have to do all that stuff.
Yeah.
If they're smart enough to take it as a freshman in college, I mean, that's.
Well, and his point in his letter is the good students are all going to Georgia to take the exam. It's raising Georgia's pass rates way up, and their success, you know, their grading scale, their pass rate scale is higher, and it's lowering Tennessee. And it's hurting the students is his main point. So I would be very supportive of the change and suggest that we do that.
I would be supportive, but there are statistics published that have it by school. So he's missing in his letter, he forgets
you
to
mean
tell
the
you
pass
about
rate?
that.
The pass
Exactly.
rate. Yeah, and he mentions in his letter that their pass rate's 90%.
But I'm saying he tracks that, but NASBA also releases the reports that says if you look at the school, that it's instead of just the state.
Yeah, well, that's kind of a side thing anyway. I think his concern is for the student's ability to go ahead and get it. That's his main concern, instead of having to wait or having to go to Georgia to do it. I think it would behoove us to help out in that situation.
What do we need to proceed? We need to do?
Motion, or is there appears to be a consensus to proceed with this being among the proposed law changes.
Yeah, I would like some sort of motion and approval to support legislative change in this area.
Make a motion that we take whatever steps necessary to make this legislative change or this statutory change or whatever the wording would be to allow students to take the exam with a bachelor's degree.
Do you want any kind of accounting hour requirement within that, or are you okay? I mean, if you got a bachelor's degree with 6 hours of accounting, is that okay?
What does Georgia do?
They wouldn't could still get back to what Stephen said here. There's no way they could be licensed unless they got the right hours when they get it.
Right.
I personally don't care.
So, I mean, the more complicated we made it, then if they have a bachelor's, then they can take it, because the exam scores expire in 10 years.
And they ultimately have to have those 30 hours of accounting hours. And if you want to get all those in your graduate level, then so be it. Or you want to get multiple bachelor's degrees, you still have to meet those requirements to become licensed.
Can I ask one question? I know we've been here a long time. So if that happened, let's say I had a bachelor's degree and I only had 120 hours and I needed 30 more hours. Are we potentially creating opportunity for the schools to create courses only to pass the CPA exam and not teach them maybe some type of advanced auditing skill or advanced tax skill, and have those preparation hours count towards the 150 requirement too? And if so, is that a problem? It may not be a problem. I don't know. It's just a question.
CPA exam is pretty inclusive of all things. Do you have to have now, under current rules, do you actually have to have a bachelor's degree, or is it just 150 hours and then the accounting requirements?
You have to have a bachelor's
It says
degree.
you have to have one? Okay. But it could be any kind of bachelor's degree?
Correct.
Tennessee's law right
Then-
now is 150 semester hours, 30 semester hours in accounting, 24 at the upper division level, 24 semester hours in general business, and 200 days prior to meeting the educational requirements. And that 200 days is what is the killer here.
I don't care what the bachelor's degree's in, as long, because since it's a requirement and it's any kind of bachelor's degree, I think we need to follow our rules the way they are. We're just saying that you don't have to get the 150. Let's just bring it back and say, once you get the bachelor's degree, you can take it. But then to get certified, then you got to do the rest of the stuff. So I'm fine with it saying whatever.
They're leaving the 150 in there to get the certification, but
To get the certification,
not to take the exam.
yeah, and it could be any bachelor's degree. And even if you haven't taken any accounting, you get a bachelor's degree in art or any other subject or whatever, then you can take it.
How does that compare to Georgia then?
It's not listed on this sheet.
Okay.
Would the easiest thing to do then just to line through the 200-day requirement in the current law? Is that the easiest change to get us to where we want to be?
Most likely.
The
Let me move.
last paragraph of his letter says, on behalf of the faculty, I'm asking you to facilitate a change to align with those in the state of Georgia. And that's why I keep asking, what is Georgia? His request is that we align ours with Georgia.
The board may admit to the examination prescribed in subsection D any candidate who has completed the educational requirements of this subsection or will complete the requirements within 200 days following the date of examination. So I'm not sure it would work just to remove the 200 days. Is there a chance that somebody could get their bachelor's degree, take the exam, wait 5 years to get their master's, and then apply for the license? It sounds like you could. Is that a problem? Does that?
Within 10 years?
Yeah.
So your scores are good for 10 years?
Maybe if the request was for us to align it with Georgia, I don't think it's wise for us to do that unless we all know and understand what Georgia's requirements are and have thought about them. So perhaps we could make the motion to ask the staff to prepare all that information for the next time we meet so that we can go through it And if that in fact is a good idea, we do it. Now again, because we're talking about legislative changes, maybe that's something we add as a second agenda item if we have some type of called meeting between now and then. If that's enough time, I don't know, but I don't feel comfortable with a blanket vote of saying we're going to change our requirements to meet Georgia's when I don't know what Georgia's are. But that's just my personal
I
opinion.
agree with that.
Well, isn't it fairly easy to pull it up and look at it, though?
Well, it doesn't have their law and rule here, so, or their laws.
On the internet, do we have internet access down there?
I don't have internet access in here.
Well, it's not necessarily the best one. We need to look at what she's done is look at what NASBA, what everybody.
Right.
Yeah, I don't
Right.
know that we want to look at Georgia necessarily. I'd like to just think outside of what any state's doing. We do know that at least 35 states, if not more, allow it prior to your 150 hours. So if this board feels that after receiving your bachelor's degree, that's okay, we can certainly, again, we would have to work with probably some other folk, with TSCPA and or NASBA in order, because this is legislative change. So drafting of a law change.
Let me suggest that, and remind the board that there are going to be a number of recommended changes to the law that's going to have to be brought to the legislature early next year. This being one of them. One of them would be to, as we approved in the July meeting, that our executive director being a CPA is not required. The peer review is going to be an item that has to require a law change, and there are a number of other cleanup matters that need to be addressed. We very well, depending upon the calendar, we may need to have a called meeting to cover those items, plus the one that we talked about with the rules before the January meeting. It will depend upon what the schedule is, when we have to get this to whatever committee or process it is. So that I think we're in agreement that this be on it, be part of that law change that's will be considered, but it would be helpful to have you share with us the research that you do in order to, so that we want to be sensitive to the Georgia situation, but on a broader base than necessarily that.
And I think it's great. I mean, obviously, the University of Tennessee School of Business is an important school and has a very large voice, but it might also be worthwhile to reach out to the other Tennessee universities that have accounting programs or business programs to see what they have. I know Dr. Charlene is on faculty at the University of Memphis. It might be interesting to see what they have, because they're concerned maybe more Mississippi or Arkansas than Georgia. So to the extent we're looking for educators to give us a heads up on what they need to do, it might be worthwhile to kind of expand our scope to education institutions.
Very good suggestion. Stephen, did you want to bring to the floor any recommendation or regarding this inactive concerns that you raised?
I need to think about it between now and then. I think that, I guess just a blanket statement is, as big of a challenge as we've had trying to accommodate this inactive status identifier, I guess I just need to think about if it's even, should we even have the inactive status? You're either a CPA or you're not. And if you choose to, because technically you're not. And again, I don't mean to. I'm not attacking anybody or trying to degrade anybody, but if you're to be a certified public accountant, that means you maintain the certain CP requirements and all the different things that you have to do. When you stop doing that, you're not technically certified. You at one time in your life you were, and then if you choose to be a CPA again, then you pick it back up, and you start doing the CPA and all the requirements, and reapply for your license to be active again. That's kind of my thoughts. I'm not jumping on one side or the other right now. It's just all this came up because we've had so much trouble with this inactive status, and I need some time to think about it too. And I wish everybody else would kind of think about it as well.
Well, I think you raised some very valid points that we need to consider. One observation was that I think it was very helpful that all the board members were able to attend all the committee meetings, deliberations yesterday. Hopefully it expedited the board meeting today. Do we have any other new business to come before the
Mr.
board?
Chairman, could I make I know I've spoken a lot today. I'll try to keep this brief. Could I make a quick comment on the record, too? I would just like to express my appreciation for Mr. Glendorf and Mr. Glover and all of what you have done. Is now that Jennifer's left us as the attorney up here, it's so nice to have attorneys who are super prepared and able to answer questions on the fly and do a lot of research. And to that extent, I would like to express our appreciation to the General Counsel of Commerce and Insurance to make sure that we're supported, Assistant Commissioner McCormack and Commissioner McPeak, because I feel like we have, in the last several meetings, really seen our level of support rise to a meteoric level, and I really appreciate that. I think it makes us a much better.
Here, here.
Yeah, I'd like to go on the record just saying I respectfully agree with that.
As do I.
Total agreement.
But we've come a long way since the first time you showed up.
Yeah, I believe so. Thank you.
I recall when we had staff attorneys, a different one at every meeting. So we've come a long way. So thank you, gentlemen.
I think that Ben's going to ask you all about the previous rules. He's going to ask you all. We need to do a roll call vote on those rules. I believe you had a motion or whatnot. I know in order to follow those. My understanding is that these rules could be done as proposed rules. That's something to approach the board with. Is that there's two ways to make. We can do them where there's a rulemaking hearing where we file these rules, and then there's actually a hearing where the public can come and comment on these rules. And that's usually for very contested rules or whatnot, but this legislature has given a second route, which is by proposed rules, meaning that if you all choose to and would like to do a roll call vote on everything that you thought was good so far, then we can take that through the process and file them at the Secretary of State's office, and they will sit there for 90 days and become effective without having to go through a rulemaking hearing, unless either 10 people of the public or a professional organization with 10 members ask the Secretary of State's office for a rulemaking hearing. So it's proposed route usually takes less time.
So you want us to do a roll call vote on affirming our prior motion that we want to go the proposed route, right?
Yes, I think these rules can go through, they potentially could go through the proposed route. I think what we've done is just really clarified, and I don't think we've made any real new requirements that would be contentious, so that it's easier for the board, not having to have a rulemaking hearing where you may not have many people show up at all and give any comments or whatnot, but we do it through the proposed route, and if somebody wants a hearing, there's a procedure to do that, but yes.
We do that roll call rule by rule, or can we do it as a group? Okay.
Well, you can do it as for everything that you've already done. And I apologize, we didn't do it earlier, but it's required.
Could I ask everybody to confirm their prior aye vote by roll call votes, starting with Gabe?
Gabe Roberts, aye.
Stephen Eldridge, aye.
Casey Stewart, aye.
Don Royston, aye.
Bill Blofus, aye.
Gay Moon, aye.
Janet Booker Davis, aye.
Larry Elmore, aye.
There are no other matters to come before the board. We stand adjourned. Thank you very much.
Good meeting.